The world ended with a blue screen. Ethan blinked, his eyes adjusting to the sudden glare that had flooded the ruined office. One moment he'd been hunched over his desk, the familiar glow of his computer monitor casting pale light across spreadsheets and coffee stains. The next, that same monitor had exploded with a cascade of shimmering azure text, scrolling too fast to read, accompanied by a voice that wasn't a voice, a presence that vibrated in his bones and echoed in the hollow spaces of his mind. System descent initiated. Earth Protocol 7A activated. Integrating reality parameters. Then came the screaming from the streets below. Ethan scrambled back from the window, his heart hammering against his ribs. Through the cracked glass, he saw the city transformed. Cars lay overturned, their metal twisted into grotesque sculptures. Fires bloomed from storefronts, painting the twilight in shifting oranges and reds. And between the wreckage, things moved, small, hunched figures with leathery green skin and crude weapons, swarming like insects from a disturbed nest. Goblins. The word surfaced from some forgotten corner of his gaming memories, absurd and terrifying in equal measure. A notification flickered at the edge of his vision, translucent and persistent. Welcome to the integrated reality system, user, Ethan. Class assignment pending. Survival objective, adapt or perish. He didn't have time to process it. The office door, which he'd barricaded with a filing cabinet, shuddered under a heavy impact. Wood splintered. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He scanned the room, desks overturned, computers shattered, papers scattered like autumn leaves. His eyes landed on a broken office chair, one of its legs snapped clean off, and a large shard of window glass glittering amidst the debris. Another crash. The door bulged inward. Instinct took over. Ethan snatched up the chair leg, a solid length of cheap aluminum, and the glass shard. His hands trembled, but his mind felt strangely clear. As his fingers closed around both objects, new text bloomed before him. Item, broken chair leg. Rarity, common. Description, a lightweight metal rod with minimal structural integrity. Item, sharp glass shard. Rarity, common. Description, jagged fragment with cutting edges. Handle with care. And beneath them, pulsing with soft golden light. Unique ability detected, synthesis master. You may fuse any two items or skills into exponentially powerful results. Cost, 10 MP per synthesis attempt. Current MP, 50/50. Synthesis. The word resonated deep within him, unlocking something he hadn't known was there. It felt like remembering a language he'd spoken in another life. Without conscious thought, he held the chair leg and glass shard together, focusing his will. Energy drained from him, a cold, tingling sensation that left him momentarily lightheaded. MP, 40/50ths. Blue light enveloped the objects, swirling like liquid mercury. The glass shard melted, flowing up the length of the chair leg, reshaping itself into a wicked, translucent point that fused seamlessly with the metal. The transformation took only seconds. When the light faded, Ethan held something new. Item, glass-tipped spear. Rarity, uncommon. Description, a lightweight spear with a razor-sharp glass tip capable of piercing leathery hides. Durability, moderate. The door exploded inward. 3 goblins tumbled into the office, their yellow eyes gleaming with malicious intelligence. They stood about 4 feet tall, wiry limbs ending in clawed hands. One brandished a rusted pipe, another a jagged kitchen knife. The third carried nothing but its own hunger, saliva dripping from needle-like teeth. Ethan's training, what little he had from weekend archery classes, kicked in. He dropped into a low stance, the spear feeling unnaturally right in his hands. The lead goblin charged, pipe raised high. Ethan sidestepped, the movement clumsy but effective. He thrust the spear forward. The glass tip sank into the creature's shoulder with a wet crunch. The goblin shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and stumbled back. Black blood, thick and foul-smelling, oozed from the wound. The other 2 hesitated, their primitive minds assessing this new threat. Ethan didn't give them time. He yanked the spear free, glass tip glistening with gore, and lunged at the goblin with the knife. This one was smarter, parrying with its blade. Steel met glass with a sharp clang that sent vibrations up Ethan's arms. But the glass held, stronger than it had any right to be. He feinted left, then drove the spear upward into the goblin's exposed throat. The creature gurgled, collapsing in a heap. The unarmed goblin scrambled backward, but Ethan was already moving, his fear transmuting into something colder, sharper. He swept the spear in a low arc, catching the creature behind the knees. It fell, and he finished it with a quick thrust to the chest. The first goblin, wounded but still dangerous, lunged from behind an overturned desk. Ethan spun, bringing the spear around in a defensive sweep. The glass tip caught the goblin across the face, opening a deep gash. It stumbled, disoriented. Ethan drove the spear point through its heart. Silence fell, broken only by Ethan's ragged breathing and the distant sounds of chaos from the streets. 3 corpses lay at his feet, already beginning to dissolve into shimmering motes of light. As they vanished, notifications flooded his vision. Experience gained, 150 XP. Level up. You are now level 2. Plus 5 to all stats. Plus 10 MP. New skill available, Basic Spear Mastery, passive. Relief washed over him, followed by a surge of exhilaration. He'd survived. More than survived, he'd fought back. The spear in his hand felt like an extension of his own body, the glass tip catching the firelight from outside like a captured star. Then the world twisted. A new notification appeared, this one edged in pulsing crimson. Mutation Roulette activated. Unique trait of Synthesis Master, Unstable Evolution Protocol. Rolling for bodily alteration. Pain exploded behind Ethan's eyes. He dropped to his knees, the spear clattering to the floor. It felt like someone had poured molten silver directly into his optic nerves. His vision blurred, colors bleeding together into a nauseating kaleidoscope. He clawed at his face, expecting to feel his eyeballs bursting, but his fingers found only intact, burning hot sockets. Through the agony, he saw the world change. Where before there had been darkness and firelight, now he saw streams of energy, luminous blue currents flowing through the air, converging on the dissolving goblin corpses, weaving through the very walls of the building. Mana. The word came unbidden, along with understanding. He could see the life force of the world, the underlying structure of reality that the system had exposed. Mutation complete, draconic eyes of mana perception. Your vision now perceives mana flows, energy concentrations, and weak points in living beings and structures. Side effects, permanent alteration to ocular biology. Increased light sensitivity. The pain receded, leaving behind a throbbing ache and a world transformed. Ethan blinked, his new eyes adjusting. The office looked different, not just in the literal sense of seeing energy patterns, but in how he perceived it. Every object had a faint aura, every living thing, or recently living thing, left residual energy signatures. He could see where the goblins' mana had been strongest, their hearts, their brains, and where it had been weakest. He picked up the spear. Its glass tip glowed with a soft blue light, the mana infused during synthesis still present, still active. He could see the energy patterns within it, the way they reinforced the molecular structure of the glass, making it harder than steel. From the street below, a new sound rose, not screams of terror, but shouts of organization. Human voices calling orders, the clash of weapons, the roar of something much larger than a goblin. Ethan moved to the window, his draconic eyes piercing the gloom. A block away, he saw figures barricading the entrance to a parking garage, fighting off a swarm of goblins. Survivors. A camp. His inventory flashed in his vision, the items he'd synthesized during his panicked experimentation while hiding earlier. Mana-infused healing salve, rare. Phasing arrow, epic. Sunburst of rejuvenating flame, legendary. He'd made them almost without thinking, fusing whatever he could find in the office, a first aid kit with a discarded energy drink, an arrow from a decorative wall piece with a shard of broken mirror, a lighter with a bottle of cleaning alcohol. The results had been extraordinary. The healing salve glowed with green energy in his mana sight. The arrow shimmered with spatial distortion. The sunburst item, a small, crystalline orb, radiated power that made his new eyes water to look at directly. Ethan looked down at his hands. They looked normal, but he could see the mana flowing through his own body now, a river of blue light tracing his veins, pooling in his core. And there, like a dark seed planted deep within that flow, something else, the mutation roulette, dormant but waiting, its mechanisms visible to his enhanced sight as intricate clockwork of crimson energy. He had power. He had tools. And he had a body that was no longer entirely human. The survivors needed help. They needed what he could make. But as he felt the unfamiliar weight of his new eyes, the way they saw too much, understood too deeply, a cold fear settled in his stomach. What would they see when they looked back at him? Would they see a savior with miraculous crafting abilities? Or would they see the burning, draconic eyes that marked him as something other, something changed? He took a deep breath, the air tasting of smoke and ozone and the copper tang of blood. The spear felt solid in his grip. The mutations, he could already feel ideas forming, ways to use this new sight in combat, in synthesis, in survival. Ethan stepped over the fading remains of the goblins, toward the broken doorway, toward the sounds of struggle in the night. His first level up had changed him. The next one would too. And the one after that. The roulette was spinning, and he could already feel it gathering momentum. But for now, there were people to help. And a world to survive. Ethan stumbled forward, his boots crunching on broken asphalt. The world had transformed overnight, not just into a hellscape of monsters, but into a shimmering tapestry of energy. His new eyes, those draconic orbs with slit pupils and iridescent scales around the edges, refused to shut off. Every time he blinked, the mundane ruins of the city dissolved into a kaleidoscope of glowing trails. Mana flowed like rivers of liquid light. He could see it now, the faint blue streams that trickled from cracks in the pavement, the vibrant green pulses from wilted plants struggling to survive, the angry red auras that radiated from distant shapes moving through the rubble. His head throbbed with the sensory overload, but he forced himself to focus. The eyes showed him more than just energy. They revealed patterns. A collapsed storefront to his left glowed with a soft golden hue. When he squinted, he could make out the faint outline of a cache beneath the debris, probably untouched supplies. To his right, a sewer grate pulsed with sickly purple energy. Something moved down there, something with too many legs and a hunger that made the mana around it churn violently. He adjusted the strap of his makeshift pack, feeling the weight of his synthesized treasures. The glass-tipped spear, uncommon, rested against his shoulder, its mana signature a steady silver thread. The other items, the salve, the arrow, the sunburst artifact, hummed with their own distinct energies in his perception. He discovered them in his hiding place after the mutation, tucked away as if his subconscious had been working while he screamed through the transformation. A low growl echoed from an alley ahead. Ethan froze, his draconic eyes locking onto the source. 3 wolf-like creatures emerged, their forms outlined in crimson mana. They were larger than any natural wolf, with matted fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Jagged bone spurs protruded from their shoulders, and their eyes glowed with the same red energy he could now perceive. Feral Shadow Wolves, Level 3. The system's notification appeared in his vision, translucent and intrusive. He pushed it aside, his grip tightening on the spear. The wolves fanned out, moving with predatory coordination. Through his new eyes, he could see their weak points, pulsing nodes of concentrated mana at their throats and behind their front legs. Where normal vision saw only fur and muscle, he saw vulnerabilities painted in brilliant target markers. He didn't wait for them to charge. With a surge of adrenaline, he lunged forward, the glass tip of his spear aimed at the nearest wolf's throat node. The creature dodged, but not fast enough. The spear grazed its shoulder, drawing black blood that sizzled on the asphalt. The other 2 closed in. Ethan spun, using the spear's length to keep them at bay. His draconic eyes tracked their movements in perfect detail, every muscle twitch, every shift in their mana flow that signaled an attack. When the left wolf leaped, he saw the mana concentrate in its hind legs a fraction of a second before it moved. He dropped into a crouch, thrusting upward as the wolf passed overhead. The glass tip sank deep into its belly, and the creature collapsed with a gurgling whine. The remaining 2 hesitated. Ethan didn't. He yanked the spear free and charged the closest one, aiming for the node behind its front leg. This time his strike was true. The wolf crumpled. The last creature turned and fled, its crimson aura fading into the ruins. Breathing heavily, Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. His eyes continued to show him the fading mana signatures of the dead wolves, their energy dissipating like smoke. He noticed something else, small, crystalline cores where their hearts should have been, glowing with dull red light. Monster core, common. He harvested 2 of them, tucking the palm-sized crystals into his pack. They felt warm to the touch, vibrating with residual energy. For the next hour, he moved through the shattered cityscape, using his draconic vision to avoid larger concentrations of hostile mana and to locate useful caches. He found a stash of canned food in a basement that glowed with faint preservation magic, and a first aid kit in a collapsed pharmacy that radiated gentle healing energy. But what he needed most was people. The sounds of organized activity grew louder, voices shouting orders, the clang of metal on metal, the occasional burst of what sounded like gunfire mixed with magical energy. His eyes led him toward a concentration of blue and green mana signatures, human ones, clustered around what had once been a community center. He approached cautiously, keeping to the shadows of ruined buildings. The survivor camp was a hastily fortified perimeter of overturned cars, furniture barricades, and makeshift watchtowers constructed from scaffolding and sheet metal. At least 30 people moved within, some tending wounds, others reinforcing defenses. Their mana signatures varied, some glowed with the steady light of combat classes, others with the softer hues of support abilities. Then he saw the attack. A pack of larger shadow wolves, 6 of them, charged the eastern barricade. These were level 4 or 5, their auras burning brighter crimson. Camp defenders, men and women with crude weapons and a few firearms, fought desperately. One guard, a woman with a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire, went down under the claws of a wolf. She screamed as dark blood sprayed from her shoulder. Ethan didn't hesitate. He broke from cover, sprinting toward the camp. As he ran, his mind raced through his inventory. The mana-infused healing salve, rare, was powerful, but he only had one application left. He needed to make more. His draconic eyes scanned the ground as he moved, picking out the faint green glow of healing herb, common, growing stubbornly through a crack in the sidewalk. He snatched a handful, leaves vibrating with life energy in his perception. Reaching the barricade, he ducked under a wild swing from a panicked defender and dropped to his knees beside the wounded woman. Her name tag read Lena. Her mana signature was flickering, growing dimmer as blood pooled beneath her. "I can help," Ethan said, his voice rough from disuse. He pulled the herbs and one of the monster cores from his pack. The synthesis interface appeared in his vision, translucent panels overlaying reality. He placed the healing herb, common, and monster core, common, into the fusion slots. Synthesis available, healing herb, common, plus monster core, common, equals mana-infused healing salve, rare. MP cost, 15. Current MP, 85/100. He confirmed the fusion. The items dissolved into streams of green and red light that swirled together in his hands, coalescing into a small clay jar filled with glowing ointment. The process took only seconds, but to the watching defenders, it must have looked like magic. Ethan scooped out the salve and applied it to Lena's wound. The effect was immediate. Flesh knitted together, the bleeding stopped, and color returned to her face. Her mana signature stabilized, glowing steadily once more. She gasped, her eyes fluttering open. "What did you?" "Stay down," Ethan said, rising to his feet. The remaining wolves had been driven back by other defenders, but one last creature lunged at a young man who'd stumbled away from the main group. Ethan acted on instinct. He didn't have time to grab his spear. Instead, he focused on the phasing arrow, epic, in his inventory. The synthesis interface flickered as he mentally selected it, then visualized it appearing in his hand. The arrow materialized, a shaft of dark wood tipped with a head that seemed to phase in and out of reality. He didn't have a bow, but he didn't need one. With a grunt of effort, he threw it like a javelin. The arrow flew true, passing through the wolf's skull as if its flesh were mist. The creature collapsed, dead before it hit the ground. The arrow dissipated into motes of light, its single use expended. Silence fell over that section of the barricade. The remaining wolves retreated, their howls fading into the ruins. Defenders stared at Ethan, at his draconic eyes that still glowed with inner light, at the jar of healing salve in his hand, at the space where the magical arrow had vanished. A man pushed through the crowd. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, with graying hair and a face lined with stress and responsibility. He wore a leather jacket over practical clothing, and a hunting rifle was slung across his back. His mana signature was a steady, commanding blue. "I'm Marcus," he said, his eyes studying Ethan with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. "I lead this camp." That was impressive. Ethan nodded, suddenly aware of how exposed he was. He could feel their eyes on his mutated eyes. He forced himself to meet Marcus's gaze. "Ethan. I was hiding nearby. Saw you needed help." "More than help," Marcus said, gesturing to the healing salve. "That's high-grade healing magic. And that arrow. I've never seen anything like it. You have synthesis abilities?" "Something like that." A woman approached, younger, with intelligent eyes and hands that glowed with faint diagnostic magic. Her name tag identified her as the camp medic. She looked Ethan over, her gaze lingering on his eyes. "Those aren't human," she said quietly, not accusingly, but with clinical curiosity. And your mana signature, it's unstable. Fluctuating in ways I haven't seen before. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. The system changes people. Not like this, the medic whispered, leaning closer. I've examined everyone in camp. Class evolutions, skill unlocks, even minor physical enhancements. But your eyes, they're fully transformed. And I'm seeing crystalline structures forming under your skin along your back. Before Ethan could respond, Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Whatever you are, you saved Lena's life and helped drive off that attack. We need every able body, and every ability, we can get. He turned to the gathered survivors. Everyone back to your posts. Double watches tonight. Ethan, come with me. Let's get you settled and see what else you can synthesize for our defenses. As they walked toward the community center building that served as the camp's headquarters, Ethan felt a sudden, sharp itch across his shoulder blades. It started as a tingling sensation, then grew into a burning pressure. He reached back instinctively, his fingers brushing against something hard and smooth breaking through his shirt. Crystalline protrusions. They felt like polished gemstones pushing through his skin, small at first but growing. He could feel them spreading, forming patterns along his spine. Through his draconic eyes, he could see his own mana signature flickering wildly, new structures of condensed energy manifesting in his flesh. He stumbled, catching himself against a wall. Marcus turned, concern on his face. You all right? Fine, Ethan managed through gritted teeth. Just, tired from the fight. But he knew it was another mutation. The roulette was spinning again. And this time, it wasn't just his eyes. Something was growing from within him, something hard and bright and utterly not human. The crystalline protrusions on Ethan's back itched with a maddening intensity, like insects burrowing beneath his skin. He walked beside Marcus through the survivor camp's makeshift perimeter, trying to ignore the growing discomfort as the camp leader pointed out defensive weaknesses. The draconic eyes of mana perception showed him the camp's energy flows, thin, frayed threads of mana woven into crude barriers that wouldn't hold against a serious assault. Your synthesis work saved 3 lives today, Marcus said, his hunting rifle slung over one shoulder. The man's commanding presence seemed to fill the space around him, a solid anchor in the chaos. That healing salve. I've never seen anything like it. Lena's already back on her feet. Ethan nodded, keeping his mutated eyes half-lidded. The crystalline structures beneath his skin pulsed with a rhythm of their own, responding to the ambient mana. He could feel them shifting, growing, preparing for something. I can make more if you have materials. Healing herbs, monster cores, anything with residual energy. We've been scavenging what we can, Marcus replied, his gaze sweeping the camp's perimeter. But every expedition risks. The whisper of displaced air was the only warning. Ethan's draconic eyes flared open, the world exploding into streams of colored energy. He saw it then, a streak of crimson mana arcing through the twilight, an arrow aimed directly at Marcus's unprotected back. Time seemed to slow as the projectile's trajectory burned itself into Ethan's enhanced vision. He didn't think. He moved. Spinning, Ethan threw himself between Marcus and the incoming threat. As he turned, the itching on his back erupted into blinding pain. Something tore through his shirt, not blood or flesh, but crystalline structures bursting from his skin in a shower of iridescent fragments. They unfolded like wings made of living gemstone, humming with resonant energy that vibrated the air around him. The arrow struck the crystalline feathers with a sound like shattering glass. Instead of piercing flesh, the projectile fragmented against the iridescent barrier, its momentum dissipating into harmless shards that fell to the dirt. The crystalline feathers shimmered with absorbed energy, their surfaces glowing with captured mana before the light faded back into their gem-like depths. Marcus had already dropped into a crouch, rifle coming up. Ambush. Take cover. Ethan stumbled backward, the new appendages on his back folding against him with an alien grace. They felt both part of him and not, crystalline structures that responded to his thoughts but moved with their own instinctual intelligence. Through his draconic eyes, he saw 3 more crimson streaks in the distance, arcing toward the camp from a ruined building 200 yards away. Bandits, Marcus snarled, sighting down his rifle. They've been picking off scavenger parties for days. Shouts erupted through the camp as guards scrambled to positions. Ethan's mind raced even as his body continued its bizarre transformation. The crystalline feathers weren't just defensive, they resonated with the ambient mana, drinking it in, storing it. He could feel the energy humming through the structures, waiting to be directed. One of the bandits broke cover, sprinting toward the camp's eastern flank with unnatural speed. A stealth skill, Ethan's enhanced perception caught the shimmer of active camouflage around the figure. The bandit moved like a ghost between shadows, another arrow already knocked. He's using some kind of concealment. Ethan shouted. Marcus fired, but the bullet passed through empty space where the bandit had been a moment before. The figure reappeared 20 feet to the left, already drawing another arrow. Ethan's synthesis ability activated almost without conscious thought. His mind analyzed the situation with terrifying clarity. The bandit's arrow, common grade, but well crafted. The stealth skill shard he could sense around the figure, uncommon, probably looted from a shadow-type monster. 2 components. 1 purpose. He needed to end this quietly, before more bandits arrived or the camp suffered casualties. Cover me for 10 seconds, Ethan said, his voice tight with concentration. Marcus didn't question, laying down suppressing fire toward the ruined building. Ethan darted forward, his crystalline feathers extending to deflect another arrow that came from a different angle. The impact sent vibrations through the structures, but they held, the mana-absorbing properties neutralizing the projectile's kinetic energy. The bandit with the stealth skill was closer now, 50 yards, moving in a zigzag pattern that made targeting impossible. Ethan reached the fallen arrow that had struck his crystalline defense, scooping it up. Even as his fingers closed around the shaft, he was reaching out with his synthesis ability, searching for the stealth skill's energy signature. There. A shimmering fragment of active camouflage, clinging to the bandit like a second skin. Ethan focused, pouring 20 MP into the synthesis. The world narrowed to the 2 components in his perception, the physical arrow and the ephemeral skill shard. He didn't need to touch the bandit directly, his ability could work at range if the components were clearly defined in his mind. The synthesis triggered with a silent pulse of energy. In his hands, the ordinary arrow transformed. The shaft became semi-transparent, flickering in and out of visibility. The fletching dissolved into wisps of shadow stuff that trailed behind it. The arrowhead gained a phasing quality, its edges blurring as if existing in multiple places at once. Phasing arrow, epic, created. Ethan didn't aim with his eyes. He aimed with his draconic perception, tracking the bandit's mana signature through the camouflage. The figure was 30 yards out now, drawing another arrow aimed at a camp guard who hadn't seen the threat. Ethan knocked the phasing arrow on his glass-tipped spear, using the weapon as an improvised bow. He didn't have archery skills, but he didn't need them, the arrow itself would find its target. He released. The phasing arrow didn't travel in a straight line. It flickered through reality, appearing in one location, disappearing, reappearing closer to its target. It passed through a crumbling wall without slowing, through a rusted car door, through the very shadows the bandit used for cover. The bandit never saw it coming. One moment he was drawing his bow, the next the phasing arrow materialized inside his chest cavity. There was no impact sound, no visible wound, just the bandit staggering as the arrow's phasing properties disrupted his internal organs. He collapsed silently, his stealth skill dissipating like smoke. Marcus stared, then nodded sharply. Good work. But there are more. 2 other bandits broke from cover, realizing their stealth advantage was gone. They charged the camp with crude melee weapons, howling battle cries. Camp guards met them with gunfire and improvised spears. Ethan joined the defense, his crystalline feathers extending to shield vulnerable points. When a bandit swung a rusted pipe at a young guard, Ethan interposed himself. The pipe struck the crystalline barrier and shattered, the vibrations absorbed by the humming structures. Ethan countered with his glass-tipped spear, driving it into the bandit's shoulder. The fight was brutal but brief. The bandits were poorly equipped compared to the camp's defenders, relying on ambush tactics rather than direct confrontation. Within minutes, the remaining attackers were subdued or fleeing. As the last bandit fell, Ethan felt the familiar surge of experience flooding his system. The notification appeared in his vision, bright and unavoidable. Level up. Ethan, level 3. Then came the pain. It started in his left arm, a deep, wrenching agony that felt like bones breaking and reforming. He stumbled away from the others, trying to hide the convulsions racking his body. His crystalline feathers retracted instinctively, folding against his back as his system prioritized the new mutation. You all right? Marcus called, concern in his voice. Ethan couldn't answer. His teeth were clenched against a scream as his left arm twisted in ways no human limb should move. The skin from wrist to elbow began to peel back, not tearing but unfolding like the petals of some mechanical flower. Beneath, instead of muscle and bone, glowing biomechanical tendons revealed themselves, cables of light and polished metal that pulsed with contained energy. The transformation continued up his arm, the skin receding to his shoulder. Where his human anatomy should have been, there now existed an arm of impossible engineering, joints that rotated in multiple axes, filaments that glowed with blue-white light, structures that hummed with power waiting to be unleashed. He fell to his knees, clutching the new limb against his chest. The biomechanical tendons responded to his thoughts, flexing with terrifying precision. He could feel their strength, easily 10 times that of his original arm. He could sense their capabilities, enhanced grip, vibration dampening, energy channeling. But he could also feel the alienness of it. This wasn't his arm anymore. It was something else wearing his skin, or what remained of it. Footsteps approached. Ethan looked up through pain-blurred vision to see the camp medic standing over him, medical kit in hand. The man's eyes widened as he took in the biomechanical arm, the crystalline feathers now partially extended again in a defensive posture, the draconic eyes that glowed with internal light. By the system. The medic whispered, his diagnostic skills undoubtedly analyzing the impossible physiology before him. Marcus arrived moments later, his expression shifting from concern to something more complicated, a mixture of gratitude, wariness, and dawning suspicion. He looked from Ethan's mutated form to the defeated bandits, to the phasing arrow that had saved them. "What's happening to you, Ethan?" Marcus asked quietly, his hand resting on his rifle but not raising it. Ethan tried to stand, the biomechanical arm supporting him with effortless strength. The new limb felt both incredibly powerful and utterly foreign, a tool of devastating potential that didn't quite belong to the man using it. "I don't know," he said truthfully, his voice strained. "But it's saving lives." The medic continued to stare, his professional curiosity battling with primal revulsion. He reached out as if to examine the biomechanical tendons, then hesitated, his hand hovering in the air. In the distance, unseen by any of them, a figure watched through enhanced optics. Guild Scout Kale observed the entire encounter, noting the crystalline defense, the synthesis of the phasing arrow, and now the biomechanical mutation. He whispered into a communication device, his report already sealing Ethan's fate. Subject's mutation escalation confirmed. Crystalline defensive structures, followed by biomechanical limb replacement. Synthesis ability remains unmatched. Recommendation, acquire before he becomes uncontrollable or another faction claims him. Back in the camp, Ethan finally regained his feet. The pain had subsided to a dull ache, the transformation complete. His left arm, no, the thing that had replaced his left arm, hung at his side, glowing softly in the gathering dusk. The crystalline feathers on his back had settled into a resting position, their iridescent surfaces catching the last light of day. He looked at Marcus, at the medic, at the camp guards who were now staring openly. He saw the gratitude in some eyes, the fear in others, the calculating assessment in a few. The bandit attack was over. The immediate threat had been neutralized. But as Ethan flexed his new biomechanical fingers, watching the tendons glow with contained power, he understood with cold certainty that his real battle was just beginning. And this time, the enemy might not be monsters or bandits. It might be the very people he was trying to save. The transformation began as a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through Ethan's bones. His left arm, already a grotesque display of glowing biomechanical tendons and metallic structures from his previous mutation, convulsed violently. The skin that had peeled back during his last level up now stretched further, tearing with wet, fibrous sounds that made the camp medic gasp and step back. Ethan gritted teeth against the pain, his draconic eyes flaring with golden light as they instinctively analyzed the mana flows surging through his transforming limb. The metallic structures beneath his skin rearranged themselves with mechanical precision, gears and pistons clicking into place. His forearm elongated, the bones dissolving and reforming into segmented, flexible sections that glowed with internal blue energy. His fingers fused together, then split apart into 6 slender, articulated manipulators that tapered to needle-fine points, each tipped with crystalline sensors that shimmered with diagnostic light. When the transformation completed, Ethan stared at what had been his arm. It was now a biomechanical tentacle, 3 feet long when fully extended, covered in interlocking plates of dark chitin-like material that shifted with his breathing. The 6 manipulators at its end moved independently, twitching and curling as if testing their new existence. Ethan tried to flex his new limb, and the tentacle whipped through the air with dangerous speed, nearly striking Marcus who stood watching with his hunting rifle held tight. "Control it," Ethan whispered to himself, focusing on the strange new neural connections he could feel forming in his brain. The tentacle responded, but erratically, one moment moving with precise grace as the manipulators picked up a fallen leaf with delicate care, the next spasming violently and digging furrows in the dirt. The crystalline feathers on his back rustled in sympathetic agitation, their iridescent surfaces catching the fading afternoon light. What in the system's name? Marcus breathed, his eyes wide. The camp leader had seen mutations before, monsters evolved constantly in this new world, but never in a human. Never like this. Before anyone could speak further, a runner burst into the clearing, panting heavily. The eastern stream. It's been poisoned by those sludge creatures from the sewer dungeon. The water's turning black and bubbling. Marcus's face hardened. How many sick? 3 already vomiting, more showing symptoms. Our purification tablets are gone, used up last week. Ethan's draconic eyes narrowed as he analyzed the situation. His new tentacle arm twitched, the manipulators flexing with what felt like anticipation. An idea formed, dangerous, untested, but potentially their only hope. He still had the basic, fireball spell, common, skill shard he'd looted from a goblin mage days ago, and Lena had given him her healing light skill, common, in gratitude for saving her life. Separately, they were nearly useless against a poison that corrupted water itself. But fused. I can cleanse it, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his new limb. The camp medic stepped forward, her diagnostic eyes, a common healer class ability, scanning Ethan's mutated form. With what? Your mutations are unstable, Ethan. That arm could kill someone if it spasms during a delicate process. It won't. Ethan focused, and the tentacle stilled, the manipulators aligning in perfect symmetry. It's designed for precision work. I can feel it in the neural interface. He turned to Marcus. I need to synthesize at the stream source. The fusion will require 25 MP, and the tentacle's stability will be crucial for channeling the energies properly. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Lead the way. They moved through the camp's perimeter defenses, Ethan's crystalline feathers deflecting stray magical residue from corrupted zones without conscious effort. The eastern stream lay just beyond a collapsed bridge, its waters indeed black and frothing with malevolent energy. Sludge creatures, amorphous blobs of toxic waste given life by the system, had burrowed into the banks, their poison seeping into the groundwater. Ethan knelt at the water's edge, his tentacle arm extending over the corrupted stream. The 6 manipulators spread wide, their crystalline tips beginning to glow as he activated his synthesis master ability. In his mind's eye, he visualized the 2 skill shards, the fireball spell, common, a sphere of destructive heat, and the healing light skill, common, a gentle radiance that mended flesh. Opposites in nature, but through synthesis. Begin fusion, he whispered. The tentacle arm hummed, its internal mechanisms cycling up to maximum capacity. Ethan felt the 25 MP drain from his reserves in a sudden rush, leaving him momentarily lightheaded. The manipulators began weaving intricate patterns in the air, trails of blue light following their movements as they drew upon both skill shards simultaneously. To his draconic eyes, the process was breathtaking. Mana streams of crimson fire and golden healing spiraled around his tentacle, initially repelling each other violently. The tentacle's fine control became essential, each manipulator adjusted the flow minutely, creating harmonic frequencies that allowed the opposing energies to resonate rather than clash. The camp medic watched, her diagnostic eyes recording every fluctuation, while Marcus kept his rifle trained on the sludge creatures that began emerging from the banks, drawn by the powerful mana emissions. They're coming. Lena shouted, knocking an arrow to her bow. Keep them back. Marcus ordered, firing a round that exploded one sludge creature into harmless slurry. Ethan ignored the combat, his entire being focused on the synthesis. The tentacle arm moved with impossible grace now, the erratic spasms gone as it found its purpose. The manipulators wove the fire and light together, layer upon layer, until they began to merge at the quantum level. A new pattern emerged, not destruction, not healing, but purification through transformative rebirth. The fusion completed with a silent detonation of light. Hovering above Ethan's tentacle manipulators was a sphere of liquid gold and white flame, rotating slowly. System text appeared in his vision, glowing with legendary intensity, sunburst of rejuvenating flame, legendary, a fusion of destructive fire and healing light that purifies corruption at its source. Radius, 30 meters. Duration, instantaneous. Cost, 25 MP cooldown, 24 hours. Without hesitation, Ethan guided the tentacle to plunge the sunburst into the poison stream. The effect was immediate and magnificent. Golden white fire spread across the water's surface not as burning destruction, but as cleansing radiance. The black corruption hissed and evaporated, replaced by crystal-clear water that glowed briefly with residual healing energy. The sludge creatures caught in the radius dissolved into harmless steam, their toxic essence purified into neutral mana particles. For 30 meters in every direction, the land itself seemed to sigh in relief as poison was scoured from soil and stone. When the light faded, the stream ran clean and pure. The sick camp members who had been brought to the edge of the effect area immediately stopped retching, color returning to their faces. Ethan slumped, the tentacle arm retracting to a more manageable length as exhaustion set in. The synthesis had taken everything he had. But as he looked at the clean water, at the grateful faces of the survivors, he felt a surge of triumph, not just for saving them, but for mastering his mutation, however temporarily. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder, careful to avoid the crystalline feathers. Incredible work, Ethan. That synthesis, legendary grade. You just saved our water supply for months. But the camp medic approached slowly, her diagnostic eyes never leaving Ethan's mutated form. She knelt beside him as he rested against a tree, her gaze intense and unblinking. Her fingers, gloved in sterile cloth, reached out but didn't touch, hovering over the biomechanical tentacle that now lay coiled in his lap like a resting serpent. Your body, she whispered, her voice so low only Ethan could hear it over the celebrating survivors. Her diagnostic eyes glowed with clinical intensity as they scanned not just the surface mutations, but the deeper changes, the rewritten bone structure, the neural adaptations, the cellular alterations that went beyond any recorded human evolution. It's not human anymore. Not entirely. The synthesis stabilizes it temporarily, but the mutations, they're integrating at a fundamental level. She met his draconic eyes, her expression a mixture of professional fascination and deep concern. What happens when there's nothing left to synthesize for stability, Ethan? What happens when the mutations become who you are? Before he could answer, she stood and walked away, leaving him alone with his transforming body and the terrifying question hanging in the newly purified air. The morning sun filtered through the skeletal remains of skyscrapers, casting long shadows across the survivor camp's makeshift training ground. Ethan stood alone in a cleared space between two ruined vehicles, his breath forming faint clouds in the chill air. His draconic eyes, those vertical slit pupils that saw the world in flowing currents of mana, scanned the empty space before him. He focused, and the crystalline feathers along his back rippled with a soft chime. Each feather was a shard of iridescent mineral, catching the light in prismatic flashes. With a thought, they fanned out, forming a shimmering shield that hovered behind him. Ethan could feel the mana flowing through them, a network of energy connecting each feather to his nervous system. He discovered they could deflect not just physical projectiles but magical attacks as well, a fact that had saved his life during the bandit ambush. His left arm, the biomechanical tentacle with its 6 fine manipulators, twitched at his side. The morning after the water purification, he'd woken to find it moving with a will of its own, the glowing tendons and metallic structures flexing in patterns he didn't command. Now, he concentrated on bringing it under control. The tentacle uncoiled, its 6 manipulators spreading like the petals of some mechanical flower. Each tip was precise enough to thread a needle, or assemble complex gear. On the ground before him lay scattered components, salvaged scrap metal, a few monster cores, and the remains of a broken rifle. Ethan's draconic eyes analyzed the mana patterns in each item. The scrap metal showed faint traces of earth element mana from its time buried in rubble. The monster cores pulsed with their respective elements, one fire, one shadow. The rifle had almost no mana signature left, its technological nature incompatible with the system's new rules. Let's see what you can do, Ethan whispered to his tentacle arm. The biomechanical limb responded, its manipulators moving with sudden purpose. 2 of them picked up pieces of scrap metal, while a third selected a fire element monster core. The remaining 3 manipulators began aligning the components with impossible precision. Ethan watched through his draconic eyes as the mana flows began to merge, the earth element scrap absorbing the fire core's energy, the metal glowing red-hot without burning his manipulators. He didn't need to use his synthesis master ability for simple assembly. That was reserved for true fusion. But this practice, controlling his mutations to work in concert, was becoming essential. The tentacle arm completed the assembly, a crude but functional dagger with a fire-infused blade. Ethan picked it up with his right hand, the normal human hand that felt increasingly alien compared to his other limbs. A flicker of movement at the edge of his mana perception made him freeze. His draconic eyes snapped toward the ruined office building 200 yards away. Through the mana flows, he saw it, a human-shaped silhouette with enhanced observation skills radiating from it like a beacon. The figure was perched on the third floor, watching through binoculars. Ethan's crystalline feathers instinctively tightened their defensive formation. The Watcher's mana signature was familiar, the same observer who'd been present during the bandit attack. Guild Scout Kale. Ethan forced himself to continue his practice, pretending not to notice. He couldn't afford to reveal that he'd detected the scout. Not yet. Instead, he focused on combining his mutations into a combat routine. He visualized an incoming attack. His draconic eyes tracked imaginary projectiles, arrows, spells, bullets. The crystalline feathers shifted, angling to intercept. His tentacle arm coiled, ready to either grab an opponent or assemble a counterweapon from nearby materials. For 10 minutes, he moved through the forms, his body becoming a living arsenal of mismatched parts. When he finally stopped, sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold. The integration was progressing. His mutations weren't just random changes, they were adapting to work together. The draconic eyes provided targeting data. The crystalline feathers offered defense. The tentacle arm gave him manipulation abilities beyond human limits. But the cost was written in the camp medic's suspicious glances, in the way survivors sometimes flinched when his feathers caught the light wrong. Ethan. Marcus's voice cut through his thoughts. The camp leader approached, his hunting rifle slung over one shoulder. The man's eyes, normal human eyes, flickered to Ethan's draconic ones, then to the crystalline feathers, then to the biomechanical tentacle that was now retracting to resemble a normal arm, if one ignored the metallic sheen and glowing seams. "We've got a problem," Marcus said, his voice low. Scouts reported a dungeon forming 3 blocks east. Some kind of scaled creatures taken up residence in the old parking garage. It's already killed 2 scavenging parties. Ethan's draconic eyes narrowed. What kind of scales? Like armor plating. Arrows bounce right off. Even Marcus's rifle did nothing, said Lena, approaching from behind Marcus. The guard he'd saved with his healing salve moved with only a slight limp now, her wounds mostly healed. Her eyes held gratitude when she looked at him, but also wariness. She'd seen his mutations up close. Marcus nodded grimly. "We need better gear. Our best armor is scavenged police vests, and they're not cutting it against whatever this thing is." Ethan's mind raced. His inventory flashed before his inner eye: glass-tipped spear, uncommon, mana-infused healing salve, rare, phasing arrow, epic, sunburst of rejuvenating flame, legendary. None were defensive items. But he had components. And he had his synthesis master ability. "I might be able to make something," Ethan said. "But I'll need materials. Scrap metal, and, if this creature has scales, one of those scales." Marcus's eyebrows rose. "You want us to get a scale from something that's killing armored scavengers?" "Just one. A loose one, maybe. Or from a dead attacker." Ethan's tentacle arm twitched, the manipulators extending slightly before he reined them in. "I can fuse it with scrap metal. Create armor that might actually protect your people." The camp leader studied him for a long moment. Ethan could see the calculation in his eyes, the balance between gratitude for Ethan's previous help and fear of what he was becoming. Finally, Marcus nodded. "We'll organize a retrieval team. You're coming with us. Your abilities might give us an edge." The parking garage loomed like a concrete tomb, its entrance choked with wrecked vehicles and debris. Ethan moved with Marcus and 5 camp defenders, his draconic eyes scanning the structure. Mana flowed in thick currents here, pooling around something deep within the garage's lower levels. The scaled creature's signature was unmistakable, a dense, earth element presence that felt like a mountain given life. "There," whispered one of the defenders, pointing. Near the entrance lay the remains of the second scavenging party. Among the blood and torn gear, Ethan's eyes locked onto a fragment, a scale the size of his hand, torn loose in whatever struggle had occurred. It shimmered with earthy brown mana, its surface layered like geological strata. Ethan's tentacle arm extended before he could stop it, the manipulators darting forward to snatch the scale. The defenders flinched back, weapons raised. Marcus put a hand up, signaling them to stand down, but his own grip tightened on his rifle. "Sorry," Ethan muttered, retracting the tentacle. The scale now rested in his normal hand, heavy and cool to the touch. "It's reactive." He didn't explain further. Instead, he gathered scrap metal from the wrecked vehicles, door panels, engine parts, anything that hadn't completely rusted. His draconic eyes analyzed each piece, selecting those with the most compatible mana signatures. The tentacle arm helped sort and arrange them with efficiency no human hands could match. When he had a pile of components and the dungeon boss's scale, Ethan focused. His synthesis master interface appeared in his vision, the familiar fusion matrix glowing. He placed the scrap metal, common, in one slot, the scale, rare, in the other. The cost displayed, 30 MP. He had enough, barely. Stand back, he warned. The defenders retreated several paces, watching with a mixture of awe and unease. Ethan's crystalline feathers spread instinctively, forming a partial shield between him and the others. Not because he feared them, but because he'd learned that high-level synthesis could have side effects. He activated the fusion. Mana surged from his body, flowing through the tentacle arm into the materials. The scrap metal glowed white-hot, the scale melting into a liquid mineral that flowed between the metal molecules. Ethan's draconic eyes watched the process at the mana level, two distinct patterns unraveling and weaving together into something new, something greater than the sum of its parts. The light faded, revealing a set of plate armor. Not the bulky medieval kind, but sleek interlocking plates that would cover vital areas without restricting movement. The surface shimmered with the scale's earthy patterns, and when Ethan touched it, he felt the dense defensive mana woven throughout. Scale-reinforced plate armor, epic. Defense, 85. Durability, 200/200. Special effect, reduces physical damage by 40%, earth element attacks by 25%. Marcus approached cautiously. Will it work? Try shooting it, Ethan said, gesturing to the chest plate. The camp leader hesitated, then raised his rifle. He fired from 10 feet away. The bullet struck with a dull clang, not the sharp crack of penetrating metal, but the sound of something hitting solid stone. The armor didn't dent. The bullet flattened and fell to the ground. A murmur went through the defenders. Lena picked up the chest plate, testing its weight. It's lighter than it looks. The scale's properties infused the metal, Ethan explained, his draconic eyes still analyzing the mana patterns. It's not just armor, it's partially alive with earth mana. Should regenerate minor damage over time. He synthesized 3 more sets, draining his MP to near zero. Each fusion left him trembling, his mutations reacting to the mana expenditure. The crystalline feathers glowed faintly, and his tentacle arms manipulators twitched with residual energy. But he'd done it. 4 sets of epic-grade armor for the camp's defenders. As they prepared to leave, Ethan's draconic eyes flickered toward the ruined office building again. The Watcher was still there. Still observing. Recording everything. 2 hours later, Guild Scout Kale lowered his enhanced binoculars. He'd seen everything, the draconic eyes that tracked mana flows, the crystalline feathers that moved with thought, the biomechanical tentacle that assembled gear with impossible precision, and finally, the synthesis that turned scrap and a single scale into epic-grade armor. He activated his communication artifact, a smooth stone that glowed with transmission mana. The image of his guild master flickered into existence, a stern-faced woman with tactical gear and eyes that missed nothing. Report, she said, her voice crackling with static. Target identified, Kale whispered, though he was alone on the office floor. Ethan, the synthesis master. His ability is exactly as rumored, he fused common scrap with a rare monster scale to create epic armor in minutes. No preparation, no ritual. Just, fusion. A pause on the other end. And the mutations? Escalating. Draconic eyes, crystalline defensive structures, a biomechanical manipulation limb. They're integrating. He's learning to weaponize them. Kale's professional detachment wavered for a moment. I've never seen anything like it. He's not just gaining abilities, he's becoming something else. Can he be controlled? Kale thought of the way Ethan's mutations moved with growing coordination, of the camp medic's whispered concerns, of the survivors' fearful glances. His body is unstable. The mutations are progressing unpredictably. But his synthesis ability, it's unmatched. With proper resources, he could outfit an army with legendaries. Another pause, longer this time. When the guild master spoke again, her voice held finality. Acquisition priority, Alpha. His value outweighs the risk. But contain the mutations. We can't have an unstable weapon. Understood. Kale ended the transmission. He took one last look through the binoculars. Ethan was back at the camp, demonstrating the armor's capabilities to Marcus and the defenders. The crystalline feathers on his back caught the afternoon light, scattering rainbows across the rubble. The biomechanical tentacle arm was retracted, but Kale had seen its precision. The draconic eyes missed nothing. A weapon. An unstable, evolving weapon. Kale packed his observation gear, his movements efficient. As he slipped from the ruined office building, his final report echoed in his mind, ready for formal submission to the guild. Target identified. His synthesis ability is unmatched, but his body is unstable. We must acquire him. The air in the dungeon corridor tasted of damp stone and ozone, thick with the promise of violence. Ethan moved at the head of the 5-person team, his draconic eyes painting the world in shifting hues of mana. The crystalline feathers along his back shimmered faintly in the gloom, catching what little light filtered through cracks in the ceiling far above. His left arm, the biomechanical tentacle with its 6 fine manipulators, rested unnaturally still at his side, a weapon waiting to be unleashed. Behind him, Marcus kept his hunting rifle ready, eyes scanning the shadows. 2 camp defenders Ethan had armored with his scale-reinforced plate followed, their movements confident in the heavy gear. Lena brought up the rear, her recovered strength evident in her steady grip on a reforged spear. "Keep formation," Marcus whispered, his voice echoing strangely in the tunnel. The report said this dungeon's deeper chambers have rare crafting materials. But the monsters here, they're drawn to strong mana signatures. Ethan felt the truth of those words immediately. As they rounded a corner, his draconic eyes flared. The mana flows in the corridor ahead weren't natural, they pulsed with predatory intelligence. 3 creatures materialized from the stone itself, their forms shifting between solid rock and ethereal mist. Stone wraiths, level 8. Their eyeless faces turned toward Ethan as one. "They're focusing on me," Ethan said, his voice tight. The crystalline feathers along his spine tingled, responding to the gathering magical energy. One of the wraiths lunged. Ethan didn't dodge. Instead, he twisted, letting the creature's stone-clawed hand scrape across his back. The crystalline feathers deflected the blow with a shower of sparks, but the impact still sent him staggering. His draconic eyes tracked the mana flow, the wraith was channeling energy for a second attack. Fire. Marcus's rifle barked, the bullet passing harmlessly through the wraith's mist phase. The camp defenders moved forward, their scale-reinforced armor absorbing glancing blows as they tried to pin the creatures. Ethan's biomechanical arm snapped into motion. The 6 manipulators extended, 2 of them forming precise gestures as he channeled mana. He didn't have a spell ready, but he had something better. From his inventory, he summoned the phasing arrow. The epic-grade projectile materialized in one manipulator while another pulled a shard of concentrated shadow energy he'd harvested from a previous battle. "Synthesis," he whispered, 25 MP draining from his reserves. The arrow and shadow shard fused in a flash of violet light. When it cleared, he held, Shadow Step Projectile, Epic, an arrow that could phase through matter and drag its target into temporary dimensional displacement. He didn't need a bow. His biomechanical arm reconfigured, forming a launching apparatus that hummed with stored kinetic energy. He fired. The arrow passed through the lead wraith's stone form without resistance, then detonated in a sphere of consuming darkness. The creature screamed, a sound of grinding stone, as half its body vanished into nothingness. The remaining portion collapsed into inert rubble. "By the system." Lena breathed. The other 2 wraiths hesitated, their mana signatures flickering with something akin to fear. Ethan's own chaotic mana signature, a swirling vortex of synthesis energy and mutation instability, flared brighter in response. The creatures turned and fled down a side passage. "They're running," one of the defenders asked, lowering his sword. "Not running," Ethan corrected, his draconic eyes tracking their retreat. "Regrouping. My mana, it's like a beacon to them. They can sense the instability." Marcus approached, his expression grim. "We need those rare materials from the crystal chamber. But if every monster in this place is going to zero in on you, then we move fast," Ethan finished. He flexed his biomechanical hand, the manipulators retracting into a more humanoid shape. "The crystal chamber should be ahead. If the reports are right, we'll find dungeon crystals there, rare-grade materials that amplify magical effects." They pressed deeper, the dungeon responding to their presence. Traps activated as they passed, pressure plates that launched poison darts, glyphs that erupted in freezing mist, pendulum blades that swung from hidden recesses. Each time, Ethan's mutations gave them an edge. His draconic eyes spotted mana triggers before they activated. His crystalline feathers deflected projectiles that came too close. His biomechanical arm disarmed mechanisms with surgical precision. But with each avoided trap, Ethan felt the dungeon's attention focusing on him. The very stones seemed to watch, the mana in the air growing thick with hostile intent. They reached the crystal chamber after 20 minutes of tense progress. The room was a geode of impossible proportions, walls covered in glowing blue crystals that pulsed with internal light. At the center of the chamber, 3 larger crystals grew from the floor, each as tall as a person and radiating potent magical energy. Dungeon crystals, Marcus confirmed. Rare grade. But look. He pointed to the ceiling. Dozens of managlyphs glowed there, arranged in complex patterns. As Ethan watched with his draconic sight, he saw the truth: the entire chamber was one massive trap. The crystals were bait. Touch one, and every glyph would activate at once. It's a kill box, Lena said, her knuckles white on her spear. The dungeon lures people in with valuable materials, then. A low hum filled the chamber. From the shadows between crystals, more stone wraiths emerged. Not 3 this time. 8. Then 12. Their forms solidified, blocking every exit. They herded us here, Ethan realized. The monsters hadn't been fleeing earlier, they'd been driving the team toward this chamber. Toward a trap designed for a large group. The lead wraith, larger than the others, with crystals growing from its stone flesh, made a grinding sound that might have been laughter. It pointed a clawed hand at Ethan, and all the glyphs on the ceiling began to brighten. "We're trapped," one of the defenders shouted, raising his shield. Ethan's mind raced. His draconic eyes analyzed the glyph patterns. Defensive magic. Offensive spells. Binding energies. All primed to activate simultaneously. They couldn't fight their way out, not against these numbers in a confined space. They couldn't disable the traps, there were too many, and the wraiths would attack the moment they tried. But there was another way. "Everyone, cluster around me," Ethan ordered, his voice cutting through the panic. Marcus didn't hesitate. "You heard him. Form up." The team closed ranks, weapons facing outward as the wraiths began their advance. Ethan reached up with his biomechanical arm, one of the manipulators plucking a single crystalline feather from his back. The feather came free with a slight tug, leaving a tingling sensation where it had been. In his other manipulator, he summoned one of the smaller dungeon crystals he'd pocketed earlier, a rare-grade sample about the size of his fist. "Synthesis," he whispered, pouring 35 MP into the fusion. The feather and crystal dissolved into motes of light that swirled together, then reformed into something new. What settled into Ethan's grasp was a disk of interlocking crystal plates, about the size of a dinner plate, with his feather's iridescent sheen preserved in its structure. Information flooded his mind. Mana Disruption Field Generator, Legendary. Effect: creates a 15-meter radius field that disrupts active magical effects, disabling traps, spells, and enchanted constructs. Duration: 3 minutes. Cooldown: 1 hour. "What is that?" Lena asked, her eyes wide. "Our way out," Ethan said. He activated the device. A pulse of silent energy expanded from the generator, washing over the chamber. The effect was immediate. The glowing glyphs on the ceiling flickered and died, their magical energies unraveling. The stone wraiths staggered as the enchantments that sustained their forms wavered. The largest wraith screamed in rage as crystals began to fall from its body. "Now!" Marcus shouted. The defenders charged, their scale-reinforced armor letting them bulldoze through the disoriented monsters. Ethan followed, the generator held before him like a shield. Where its field touched, magical effects failed. A wraith's stone-shaping ability dissolved mid-attack. A trap that should have launched spikes remained inert. They fought their way back through the corridors, the generator's field carving a path through the dungeon's magical defenses. Ethan felt the strain of maintaining the device, it drew on his own mana reserves to sustain the disruption field. His MP dropped steadily, 120. 95, 70. They reached a relatively clear chamber, the last of the pursuing wraiths falling to Marcus's precise rifle shots. Ethan deactivated the generator as the 3-minute duration expired. The device cooled in his hand, its crystal plates dimming. "System's mercy," one of the defenders panted, leaning against the wall. "I thought we were dead." Marcus clapped Ethan on the shoulder, carefully avoiding the crystalline feathers. "That device, you made it on the spot." "Fused materials I had," Ethan said, storing the generator in his inventory. It would need an hour to recharge, but it had saved them. The dungeon crystals amplify magical properties. My feathers, they disrupt spells. Combined, they create area denial. Lena was staring at him again. Not with fear this time, but with something closer to awe. You turned your own body into a crafting material. Before Ethan could respond, a notification flashed before his eyes. Level up. Congratulations. You have reached level 4. +5 to all stats. +10 MP. Mutation Roulette activating. Ethan's breath caught. Not here. Not in front of them. He tried to suppress it, to force the mutation to wait, but the roulette didn't work that way. Pain lanced through his legs, sudden and brutal. He stumbled, catching himself against the wall as his knees buckled. Ethan. Marcus took a step toward him. Stay back. Ethan gasped. It was too late. The changes were already happening. Bone spurs erupted from his calves with sickening cracks, tearing through his pants. The sound was like snapping branches. The spurs elongated, reshaping, forming new joints and structures. His feet twisted, the bones breaking and reforming in seconds. His heels lifted from the ground as his legs reconfigured themselves into digitigrade structures, like a bird's, or a predator's. The pain was white-hot, consuming, but through it, Ethan felt the terrifying efficiency of the transformation. Muscles reattached to new anchor points. Tendons lengthened. The bone spurs smoothed into streamlined, powerful structures designed for speed and leaping. When it was over, seconds that felt like hours, Ethan stood on new legs. His feet ended in claw-like toes that dug into the stone floor. His calves were elongated, powerful, with visible tendon and bone structure that looked both organic and engineered. He took an experimental step, and nearly fell as his body adjusted to the new balance. The chamber was silent. All 4 of his companions stared, their expressions a mix of horror and disbelief. Marcus finally broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan, what's happening to you? Ethan looked down at his mutated legs, then back at their faces. He saw no gratitude now. No awe. Only fear. And he knew, with cold certainty, that he could no longer hide what he was becoming. The ground shook with a deep, grinding roar that seemed to come from the very bones of the dungeon. Ethan's newly mutated legs, digitigrade structures with bone spurs protruding from his calves, buckled slightly under him as the tremor passed through the crystal chamber. Pain lanced up his spine with each vibration, sharp and electric, as if his nervous system was still learning how to interpret signals from limbs that weren't entirely his own. Run. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos, his hunting rifle already slung over his shoulder as he grabbed Lena's arm. The camp defender who'd been standing nearest to the entrance staggered as a crack spiderwebbed across the ceiling, raining dust and fragments of glowing crystal. Ethan's draconic eyes flared with mana perception, showing him the truth Marcus couldn't see. The entire dungeon structure was collapsing, not from natural decay, but from the backlash of his own creation. The mana disruption field generator he'd synthesized to disable the traps had done more than just neutralize magical glyphs, it had destabilized the very foundation of this place. Blue-white energy lines that should have been stable were now flickering like dying stars, and the walls pulsed with dangerous, erratic frequencies. My legs, Ethan thought, the realization hitting him even as he took his first experimental step. The digitigrade structure, like a predator's hindquarters, propelled him forward with explosive force. He covered 10 feet in what should have been 3 strides, but the impact sent fresh agony shooting through his joints. His body wasn't built for this. Not yet. Everyone, follow me. Ethan shouted, his voice carrying an edge of desperation he hadn't intended. The crystalline feathers along his shoulders and back twitched instinctively, catching falling debris and deflecting it away from the team. His biomechanical tentacle arm, now moving with the fluid grace he'd painstakingly practiced, reached out to steady one of the camp defenders who'd stumbled over a cracked floor tile. Lena moved with the limping gait of someone still recovering from her earlier wounds, but her eyes were sharp. Ethan, your legs. Later, he snapped, then immediately regretted the tone. Just keep moving. The exit's collapsing faster than we can run. Another tremor, stronger this time. A section of the ceiling 20 yards ahead crashed down in a shower of stone and crystal dust, blocking their primary escape route. Marcus skidded to a halt, his face pale in the dim light. We're trapped. Ethan's mind raced even as his body protested every movement. His inventory flashed before his mental eye, glass-tipped spear, uncommon, mana-infused healing salve, rare, phasing arrow, epic, sunburst of rejuvenating flame, legendary, the two legendary items he'd created himself, and there, tucked away in a side pouch, something he'd scavenged days ago and nearly forgotten. Teleportation scroll fragment, uncommon. A torn piece of parchment with half a magical formula still legible, useless on its own. But he wasn't just Ethan anymore. He was the synthesis master. "Give me 30 seconds, Ethan said, his voice dropping to a calm that belied the panic clawing at his throat. "We don't have 30 seconds, one of the camp defenders shouted, pointing upward where more cracks were spreading across the ceiling like lightning frozen in stone. Ethan ignored him. His biomechanical tentacle arm extended, its 6 fine manipulators unfolding with precise, clicking sounds. At the same time, he reached into his pouch with his remaining human hand, fingers closing around the parchment fragment. The pain in his legs was becoming a constant throb, but he forced himself to focus. 40 MP. That's what the system was demanding for this synthesis. More than he'd ever spent at once. "What are you doing?" Marcus demanded, his eyes darting between Ethan's preparations and the collapsing dungeon. "Saving us," Ethan whispered. He activated, Synthesis Master. The world narrowed to 2 points, the teleportation scroll fragment in his hand, and the sensation of speed burning in his mutated legs. His draconic eyes saw the mana flows twist and merge as his tentacle arm guided the process with impossible precision. The scroll fragment dissolved into shimmering particles of blue light. At the same time, the very essence of his digitigrade mutation, the explosive acceleration, the predator's grace, the painful adaptation, pulled from his body in a wave of golden energy. 40 MP drained from his reserves in a single, gut-wrenching pull. Ethan gasped, staggering as the synthesis consumed not just mana but something deeper, something tied to his life force. For a terrifying moment, he felt his legs weaken, as if the mutation itself was being ripped away. Then it was done. Blink step technique, epic. Knowledge flooded his mind, spatial equations, momentum calculations, short-range teleportation vectors. Not true teleportation, not with just a fragment to work with, but something better. Something that combined magical displacement with his own physical speed. "Everyone, grab hold," Ethan commanded, his voice ringing with newfound authority. Marcus didn't hesitate this time. He understood what Ethan was now, even if he didn't understand how. The camp leader herded Lena and the 2 defenders into a tight group around Ethan, hands gripping shoulders, forming a human chain. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the blink step technique settle into his muscles like a second skin. His digitigrade legs coiled beneath him, the bone spurs digging into the stone floor. The pain was still there, but transformed now, not just agony, but potential energy waiting to be unleashed. He activated the technique. The world blurred. Not like running, not even like his mutated sprint. This was displacement. One moment they were in the crystal chamber as the ceiling began its final collapse. The next. They stood 50 yards down the corridor, having bypassed the collapsed section entirely. The air popped with the sound of displaced atmosphere. Again. Ethan grunted, already feeling the strain. The blink step wasn't infinite. Each use cost stamina, and his MP was dangerously low. Another blur. Another displacement. They passed through collapsing tunnels like ghosts, Ethan's draconic eyes guiding them through the safest paths even as his body protested each jump. His crystalline feathers flared with defensive energy, deflecting falling debris that materialized too close during their brief moments between blinks. Third jump. Fourth. Ethan's vision began to spot with darkness. His lungs burned. The synthesis had taken more than just MP, it had taken something vital, and he was paying for it now with every ounce of his being. "There!" Lena shouted, pointing ahead where daylight filtered through a crumbling archway. "The entrance. The way out." Ethan gathered what remained of his strength. His digitigrade legs trembled beneath him, the bone spurs aching with a deep, marrow-deep pain. But he could see the exit. He could see safety. One final blink step. They emerged into the late afternoon sun just as the entire hillside behind them collapsed inward with a roar that shook the earth. Dust plumed into the sky, swallowing the dungeon entrance forever. For a long moment, no one spoke. They stood in the clearing beyond the dungeon, breathing hard, covered in dust and sweat. The 2 camp defenders sank to their knees, trembling with adrenaline and relief. Lena leaned against a tree, her face pale but alive. Marcus turned to Ethan, his expression unreadable. "Those jumps. That wasn't just your mutation." "No," Ethan said simply. He didn't have the energy for explanations. His entire body felt hollowed out, drained not just of mana but of something more fundamental. The blink step technique hovered in his mind like a new instinct, but using it had cost him dearly. The walk back to camp was silent. Ethan moved with a strange, loping gait, his digitigrade legs still not fully integrated with his nervous system. Each step sent jolts of pain up his spine, but there was power there too, a potential for speed he'd only begun to tap. The bone spurs on his calves caught the fading light, gleaming like polished ivory. When they reached the survivor camp, the usual bustle of evening preparations was underway. People moved between makeshift shelters, tending cook fires, repairing gear. Several survivors glanced their way, noting their dust-covered appearance, but most returned to their tasks quickly enough. Life went on, even at the end of the world. Ethan made his way to the water barrel near his designated work area. He needed to clean up, to think, to process what had just happened. The synthesis had worked, better than he'd dared hope, but the cost. He dipped his hands into the cool water, splashing it over his face. The shock helped clear some of the fatigue. When he straightened, he caught his reflection in the slightly rippling surface of the barrel. And froze. At first, he thought it was just dust or trick of the fading light. But no. As he leaned closer, the truth became undeniable. His skin had changed. Not dramatically, not yet. But there, along his jawline, across the backs of his hands, tracing the line of his neck, a faint, scales-like texture had appeared. It shimmered in the twilight, catching the firelight from nearby campfires in tiny, iridescent patterns. Like dragon scales in miniature. Like his draconic eyes had begun spreading their influence across his entire body. Ethan stared at his reflection, at the face that was becoming less human with every level, every mutation, every desperate synthesis. The man in the water stared back with golden, slit-pupiled eyes, with skin that glittered with alien promise, with a body that was becoming a patchwork of impossible evolutions. He didn't move for a long time. Around him, the camp continued its evening rhythms, unaware that the person they relied on for survival was becoming something they might one day fear. And in the shadows between shelters, unseen by Ethan or anyone else, Guild Scout Kale watched. His eyes recorded every detail, the new gait, the bone spurs, the shimmering skin. His fingers moved silently over a concealed communication device, sending another report to the rival guild. The message was simple, and terrifying in its implications: subject's mutation escalation accelerating. Physical integration now visible at surface level. Recommend immediate acquisition before full transformation completes. But Ethan didn't see Kale. He only saw his own reflection, and the future it promised, a future where he might save everyone, but lose himself completely. The morning sun filtered through the shattered windows of the survivor camp's makeshift mess hall, casting long shadows across the worn concrete floor. Ethan stood by the water barrel, his hands submerged in the cool liquid as he washed the grime from yesterday's dungeon expedition. As he lifted his hands, droplets cascaded down his forearms, catching the light in a way that made him pause. His skin shimmered. Not the subtle iridescence he'd noticed yesterday, but a definite pattern of overlapping scales that traced up his arms like armor plating. They were faint, barely raised above the skin's surface, but unmistakably reptilian. When he flexed his fingers, the scales shifted with a soft rustling sound, like dried leaves brushing together. He touched his neck, finding the same texture creeping up toward his jawline. Ethan. The voice came from behind him. Lena stood at the entrance to the mess hall, her bandaged arm still showing the pink healing tissue where his mana-infused healing salve had worked its magic. Her eyes widened as she took in his appearance. Your skin. It's nothing, Ethan said too quickly, pulling his sleeves down. The fabric of his shirt caught on the roughened texture of his forearms. Just a reaction to the dungeon crystals. Lena didn't look convinced. She took a step closer, her medical training overriding her caution. Let me see. Before Ethan could protest, she reached out and pushed his sleeve up. Her fingers brushed against the scaled surface, and she recoiled as if burned. These aren't burns or rashes, she whispered. They're integrated. Like they grew from your skin. Across the room, other survivors had stopped their morning routines to watch. A woman preparing ration packets dropped a can with a clatter. A man sharpening a knife paused, his eyes fixed on Ethan's exposed arm. Whispers began to circulate, murmurs of monster and infection and what if it spreads. Marcus entered the hall, his hunting rifle slung over his shoulder. He took in the scene with a single sweeping glance. Everyone back to work, he commanded, his voice cutting through the tension. Lena, with me. As the survivors reluctantly returned to their tasks, Marcus approached Ethan. His eyes were hard, assessing. The scaled skin, does it do anything? Ethan flexed his arm, watching as the scales shifted. Minor damage resistance, he admitted. I tested it earlier with a knife. The blade skids off unless you apply significant force. And the pain from your legs? Better, Ethan said, though it was only half true. The digitigrade structure of his calves still ached with every step, but the explosive speed they granted when combined with his blink step technique was undeniable. He'd practiced in the pre-dawn hours, moving from one end of the camp to the other in bursts of displaced air that left dust swirling in his wake. Marcus nodded slowly. We need every advantage we can get. But Ethan, people are scared. Your mutations are becoming harder to hide. I know, Ethan said, his voice tight. He could feel the weight of stares on his back, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. What was he becoming? Was he still human? Would he turn on them? Before Marcus could respond, a shout echoed from the camp's perimeter. Breach! West wall! Ethan's draconic eyes flared to life without conscious thought, the world shifting into a landscape of flowing mana streams. He saw it immediately, 3 human-shaped signatures moving with unnatural speed, their mana signatures tinged with the metallic sharpness of enhancement skills. They weren't monsters. They were guild agents. Stay here, Marcus ordered, unslinging his rifle. But Ethan was already moving, his digitigrade legs propelling him forward in a burst of speed that left Marcus staggering back from the displaced air. Ethan emerged into the camp's central courtyard just as the first agent breached the west wall. The man moved with practiced efficiency, his form blurred by some speed-enhancing skill. He carried no visible weapons, but his hands glowed with containment glyphs, binding magic designed to immobilize, not kill. Capture. Not elimination. The realization clicked in Ethan's mind even as his body reacted. His crystalline feathers erupted from his shoulders and back, forming a defensive canopy that shimmered with refracted light. The first agent's binding glyphs splashed against the feathers, their magic dissipating in a shower of harmless sparks. Target confirmed, the agent called out, his voice distorted by a vocal modulator. Mutation Stage 4. Proceed with containment protocol. 2 more agents dropped from the rooftops, their movements synchronized. One fired a net of glowing threads that expanded in midair, while the other began chanting, his hands weaving complex patterns in the air. Ethan recognized the skill, Arcane Shackles, a rare-tier binding ability designed to restrict movement and suppress mana flow. Ethan's biomechanical tentacle arm snapped out from beneath his shirt, its segmented length whipping through the air. He caught the net with its grasping claw, but the threads immediately began constricting, digging into the mechanical flesh with sizzling energy. Pain lanced up his arm, a sharp, electric agony that made his vision swim. He couldn't break free. The net was designed to counter physical strength, and his tentacle arm, for all its precision, lacked the raw power needed to tear through enchanted bindings. But he had something else. As the chanting agent completed his spell, arcs of blue energy shot toward Ethan. They wrapped around his legs, his torso, his remaining human arm, cold bands of force that tightened with each passing second. Ethan gasped as the bindings cut off his mana circulation, causing his draconic eyes to flicker and dim. Containment achieved, the lead agent announced. Prepare for extraction. Ethan's mind raced. The bindings were skill-based, not item-based. Which meant he focused inward, reaching for the chaotic well of power that was his synthesis master ability. The system interface flickered before his eyes, distorted by the mana-suppressing bindings but still accessible. He selected 2 targets, the Arcane Shackles, skill currently binding him, and his own biomechanical tentacle arm. The cost appeared in glowing red text, 45 MP, nearly all his remaining mana pool. He didn't hesitate. Synthesis initiated. Arcane Shackles, rare, plus, biomechanical tentacle arm, unique, equals. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the bindings around his tentacle arm began to glow, their blue energy bleeding into the mechanical flesh. The net of threads dissolved first, absorbed into the shifting metal. Then the shackles themselves unwound from his body, flowing like liquid light into his arm. The tentacle arm convulsed, its segments expanding and contracting as new patterns etched themselves across its surface. Glyphs appeared, ancient, angular symbols that pulsed with contained power. The claw at its tip reshaped itself, becoming a complex lattice of interlocking parts. Synthesis complete. Living constrictor chains, legendary, acquired. Ethan didn't need to read the description. He felt the power thrumming through the newly transformed limb. With a thought, the tentacle arm lashed out, not as a single appendage, but as a dozen segmented chains that erupted from its tip. They moved with impossible speed, each chain tipped with a grasping claw that glowed with the same blue energy that had moments before bound him. The lead agent had time for one startled cry before the chains wrapped around him. They didn't just bind, they adapted. When he tried to phase through them with a displacement skill, the chains phased with him. When he attempted to brute force his way free, they tightened, their grip adjusting to counter exactly the amount of force he applied. The other two agents fared no better. One speed enhancement meant nothing against chains that moved faster than thought. The other's defensive barriers shattered under the relentless, adaptive pressure. Within seconds, all three agents were immobilized, wrapped in glowing blue chains that pulsed rhythmically, like the heartbeat of some ancient beast. Ethan stood panting in the center of the courtyard, his living constrictor chains retracting back into their base form. The scaled skin along his arms gleamed in the sunlight, unmistakably non-human. Around him, survivors watched in horrified silence. Then a new presence announced itself. Not with sound, but with pressure, a weight in the air that made Ethan's draconic eyes ache. The mana streams around him twisted, warping toward a single point at the camp's main gate. A man stepped through. He wore simple combat fatigues, unadorned by guild insignias or rank markings. His hair was cropped short, his face lined with the scars of countless battles. But it was his eyes that commanded attention. They glowed with a cold, system blue light that held no warmth, no humanity. System-administered power. Ethan recognized it immediately. This wasn't just a guild leader. This was someone who had been granted authority by the system itself. The man's gaze swept over the immobilized agents, then settled on Ethan. His expression didn't change, but the pressure in the air intensified, pushing down on Ethan until his digitigrade legs trembled with the strain of remaining upright. Impressive, the man said, his voice calm, almost conversational. The synthesis ability adapts even to direct countermeasures. My scout's reports didn't do you justice. Ethan forced his voice to remain steady. Who are you? The name is irrelevant. What matters is what you are. The man took a step forward, and the ground beneath his feet didn't just crack, it reformed, the concrete smoothing itself into perfect flatness as if paying homage to his passage. A prototype. An anomaly. A key piece in a game you don't yet understand. He stopped 10 feet away, well outside the range of Ethan's living constrictor chains. His glowing eyes narrowed slightly as he examined Ethan's scaled skin, his crystalline feathers, the biomechanical arm now thrumming with legendary power. Your mutations accelerate with each level, the man continued. Your synthesis ability grows more potent. But you lack control. You lack direction. You're a child playing with godlike tools, unaware that every fusion, every mutation, brings you closer to becoming something that cannot exist in this world. What do you want? Ethan demanded. What I've always wanted, the man said. To complete the system's purpose. To evolve humanity into something that can survive what's coming. He extended a hand, palm up. The air above it shimmered, forming complex system interfaces that Ethan's draconic eyes could barely parse. You're coming with us, mutation freak. Willingly or otherwise. Behind him, the camp survivors had gathered, Marcus with his rifle raised, Lena with healing energy crackling at her fingertips, dozens of others armed with whatever weapons they could find. But they might as well have been statues for all the attention the guild leader paid them. His eyes remained fixed on Ethan, glowing with that terrible, absolute blue light. The choice is simple, he said. Come quietly, and we'll help you control what you're becoming. Resist. He smiled, a thin, humorless expression. Well. Let's just say my methods of containment are considerably less gentle than my agents. The pressure in the air spiked, becoming a physical force that drove Ethan to one knee. His scaled skin resisted the crushing weight, but his bones groaned in protest. His living constrictor chains twitched, seeking a target, but the guild leader stood just beyond their reach, protected by that aura of system-granted authority. Ethan looked up, his draconic eyes meeting those glowing blue orbs. He saw no malice there, no cruelty. Only cold, calculating purpose. This man didn't hate him. Didn't fear him. Saw him only as a resource to be acquired, a tool to be used. And in that moment, Ethan understood the true nature of the threat he faced. It wasn't the monsters. It wasn't the apocalypse. It was the system itself, and the people who believed they understood its will. He gathered his remaining strength, feeling the chaotic energy of his mutations swirling beneath his skin. The crystalline feathers on his back shifted, aligning themselves. His digitigrade legs coiled, ready to spring. His living constrictor chains hummed with pent-up power. He wouldn't go quietly. But as he prepared to fight, he couldn't shake the chilling certainty that this was only the beginning. That the guild leader's arrival marked a turning point from which there would be no return. The man's smile widened slightly, as if he could read Ethan's thoughts. "Good," he said softly. "I was hoping you'd choose resistance." The air crackled with tension as Ethan faced the rival guild leader. The man's eyes glowed with an unnatural blue light, a visible manifestation of system-administered power that made the very ground beneath them hum with restrained energy. Ethan's own body responded before he could think, his draconic eyes flared open, revealing the world as a tapestry of mana flows. He saw the guild leader not as a man, but as a nexus of tightly controlled power, with shimmering lines of energy converging at his core and radiating outward like a spiderweb. "Surrender, Synthesis Master," the leader said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. "Your mutations are spiraling out of control. We can help stabilize you. The system has protocols for anomalies like you." Ethan didn't answer. His crystalline feathers, scattered across his shoulders and back, twitched as they sensed the gathering energy around the guild leader. The faint scale-like texture on his skin shimmered in the fading daylight, a constant reminder of how far he'd strayed from human. His digitigrade legs, still aching from their recent transformation, coiled beneath him, ready to spring. The attack came without warning. The guild leader raised a hand, and a beam of condensed blue energy shot toward Ethan. It wasn't a spell Ethan recognized, it felt older, more fundamental, as if the system itself were lashing out. His crystalline feathers reacted instinctively, flaring out to form a defensive lattice. The energy beam struck the feathers with a sound like shattering glass, but instead of breaking, the crystals absorbed the impact, dispersing it in a shower of harmless light fragments. Ethan staggered back, feeling the strain in his mutated tissues. He didn't wait for a second attack. Activating his blink step technique, he vanished from his position and reappeared behind the guild leader, his biomechanical tentacle arm lashing out. The arm, a fusion of organic muscle and metallic cabling, moved with predatory grace, aiming to wrap around the leader's throat. But the guild leader was faster. He didn't turn, he simply raised a barrier of blue energy that solidified into a translucent wall. The tentacle arm struck it and rebounded, sending shocks of pain up Ethan's shoulder. "You're fighting the inevitable," the guild leader said, turning slowly. His eyes burned brighter. "Every mutation brings you closer to becoming a monster. Look at yourself." Ethan didn't need to look. He could feel it, the bone spurs in his legs digging into his flesh with each movement, the alien weight of the tentacle arm, the way his draconic eyes saw too much, picking out weaknesses in the guild leader's energy field. There, at the small of his back, a slight fluctuation in the mana flow. A vulnerability. He lunged again, this time using his digitigrade legs to propel himself in a series of rapid, zigzagging leaps. The guild leader responded with a barrage of energy blasts, each one precise and deadly. Ethan's crystalline feathers deflected most, but one grazed his side, searing through his clothing and leaving a burn that smelled of ozone and burnt flesh. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain. His inventory flashed in his mind, he had one chance. From his storage, he pulled the divine essence shard. It was a fragment he'd synthesized weeks ago from a rare dungeon core and a fallen angel's feather, burning through nearly all his MP at the time. The shard glowed with a soft, golden light, humming with potential power. Mythic grade, according to the system. But using it raw would be wasteful, and dangerous. The guild leader advanced, his energy field expanding to encase the area. "Last chance, Ethan. Come willingly, or we'll have to force you. The system tolerates anomalies, but not rebellion." Ethan's mind raced. His mutations were reacting violently to the admin-level pressure, his draconic eyes were leaking tears of mana, his crystalline feathers vibrating at a frequency that made his bones ache, his tentacle arm twitching with autonomous spasms. He could feel them destabilizing, threatening to tear him apart from the inside. He needed something to counteract it, to harness the chaos rather than be consumed by it. In a desperate gamble, he focused his synthesis master ability. Not on items this time, but on himself. He visualized fusing all his active mutations, the draconic eyes of mana perception, the crystalline feathers, the biomechanical tentacle arm, the digitigrade legs, even the scaled skin, with the divine essence shard. The cost flashed in his vision, 50 MP, more than he had left. And the health penalty, a massive chunk of his vitality. He didn't hesitate. Synthesize, he whispered, pouring every ounce of will into the command. The world dissolved into light and pain. The divine essence shard melted into his chest, its golden energy surging through his veins like liquid fire. His mutations screamed in response, the draconic eyes blazed with new insight, seeing not just mana but the very fabric of reality. The crystalline feathers hardened into diamond-like plates that covered his body in an exoskeleton, the tentacle arms split into multiple strands, each tipped with razor-sharp barbs, his legs elongated further, muscles reforging into springs of pure force. For a moment, he was more than human, a being of synthesized perfection, every part working in harmony. The system notification burned in his vision, temporary evolution stabilizer, godly, created. Duration, 60 seconds. Effects, all mutations stabilized and enhanced, admin level resistance granted, synthesis cost reduced to 0. Ethan rose, his form now a terrifying amalgamation of his previous mutations, but controlled, purposeful. The guild leader's eyes widened, the blue glow flickered. What have you done? I stopped fighting it, Ethan said, his voice echoing with multiple tones. He moved. With the stabilizer active, his speed was beyond comprehension. He crossed the distance in a blur, his enhanced tentacle arms lashing out. They bypassed the guild leader's energy barrier entirely, striking at the weak point his draconic eyes had identified. The leader gasped as the barbs pierced his lower back, disrupting his mana flow. The blue energy around him sputtered and died. Ethan didn't wait to see him fall. He turned and ran, his digitigrade legs propelling him in leaps that covered dozens of meters at a time. Behind him, he heard shouts, the other guild agents recovering, but they were too slow. He used his blink step technique in tandem with his new speed, vanishing and reappearing across the ruined landscape, putting distance between himself and the camp, the guild, everything. He didn't stop until the stabilizer's timer hit 0. Then, it all collapsed. The godly enhancement evaporated like mist in sunlight. His mutations reverted to their unstable states, the crystalline feathers retracted into painful stubs, the tentacle arm shriveled back to its original form, his legs buckled under him as the bone spurs dug deeper. He collapsed against the wall of a shattered office building, gasping for air. His health bar was critically low, flashing red warnings in his vision. But worse than the physical pain was what came after. As the stabilizer wore off, his mind didn't return to normal. Instead, it flooded with alien instincts, whispers that weren't words but concepts, urges that didn't feel human. They spoke of synthesis beyond items, beyond skills. Of fusing living things, of rewriting biology, of creating life from nothing. The whispers were seductive, promising power that made his previous creations seem like child's toys. He saw visions, a world remade through synthesis, creatures born of his will, realities stitched together from disparate parts. He clutched his head, trying to push the thoughts away, but they clung like parasites. His draconic eyes, now back to their normal unstable state, saw the world not as a place of survival, but as a collection of components waiting to be combined. The rubble around him wasn't debris, it was raw material. The distant howls of monsters weren't threats, they were genetic templates. Ethan shuddered, cold sweat mixing with the blood from his wounds. He had escaped the guild, but he hadn't escaped himself. The mutations were no longer just changing his body, they were changing his mind. And the whispers promised that this was only the beginning. Ethan crouched in the shadow of a collapsed cathedral spire, his scaled skin shimmering with residual mana from the temporary evolution stabilizer's fading effects. The ruin smelled of ozone and old stone, a forgotten place where the system's descent had shattered stained glass and toppled marble saints. His breath came in ragged gasps, each exhalation misting in the cold dawn air. Inside his skull, the alien instincts whispered. They weren't voices, exactly, more like impulses layered beneath his own thoughts. A predatory urge to stalk the rubble for hidden life. A creative compulsion to rearrange fallen stones into geometric patterns. And beneath it all, a deep, resonant hunger for synthesis that extended beyond items and skills. Fuse, the instincts murmured. Everything wants to become more. Ethan pressed his palms against his temples, the faint scales along his forearms catching the first rays of sunlight filtering through broken arches. His draconic eyes, still active without conscious effort, painted the world in mana flows, silver threads weaving through stone, golden motes dancing in sunbeams, deep violet pulses from the cathedral's ruined altar where magic had once been channeled. That altar, the instincts insisted. Asterisk, it holds potential. Combine it with the dawn, asterisk. I'm not fusing concepts, Ethan muttered through gritted teeth, his biomechanical tentacle arm twitching involuntarily at his side. The limb had grown more integrated since the stabilizer, its metallic plates now blending seamlessly into his flesh at the shoulder, though it still felt alien when it moved of its own accord. But the instincts persisted. They showed him not words, but images, sunlight pooling on the altar's cracked surface, the ancient magic within awakening, the two becoming something new and greater. The compulsion built like pressure behind his eyes, his crystalline feathers along his spine vibrating with resonant energy. Ethan's digitigrade legs ached as he pushed himself upright. Every step sent jolts through his altered joints, but they carried him across the rubble with unnatural grace. He reached the altar, a massive slab of dark stone carved with runes now half obscured by moss and debris. His draconic eyes traced the mana patterns, an epic tier enchantment for channeling divine energy, dormant but intact. Now, the instincts urged. Asterisk the sunlight. Take it, asterisk. How do I fuse sunlight? Ethan whispered, but even as he asked, his body moved without his full consent. His biomechanical tentacle arm extended, its tip glowing with the same golden light that bathed the ruin. The crystalline feathers along his spine flared, refracting dawn beams into concentrated shafts that struck the altar. Ethan's synthesis master ability activated automatically, his MP draining rapidly as the system prompt flashed in his vision. Synthesis available, concept, dawn's first light, plus enchanted altar, epic. MP cost, 55. Result? He tried to resist, but the alien instincts had woven themselves into his very will. His hand, still mostly human, though scaled, reached out and touched the altar. The 55 MP vanished from his reserves in a torrent, leaving him gasping as golden light erupted from the stone. The synthesis wasn't like his previous fusions. There was no flash of energy, no dramatic transformation. Instead, the sunlight seemed to pour into the altar like liquid gold, filling the runes until they glowed with inner fire. The stone itself changed, dark granite becoming translucent crystal shot through with veins of dawn-colored light. It reshaped itself, flowing upward into a new form, an anvil. Not just any anvil. This one stood waist-high, forged from solidified sunlight and enchanted stone. Its surface shimmered with captured morning, and when Ethan's draconic eyes focused on it, he saw mana patterns so complex they made his head ache. Dawnforge Anvil, Mythic, created. Effect, unparalleled crafting station. Any item synthesized upon this anvil receives plus 200% potency, plus 150% durability, and may incorporate conceptual elements. Passive, radiates area of purified light that repels corruption-type monsters. Ethan stared at the creation, his mind reeling. He'd fused a concept with an object. The instincts had been right, and that terrified him more than any mutation. As he reached out to touch the anvil's warm surface, the air before him rippled like disturbed water. A figure materialized from nothingness, composed of shifting blue light and geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. It had no true form, just a humanoid silhouette constantly rearranging itself into new shapes, spheres, cubes, intricate fractals, then back to humanoid again. Its voice echoed not through the air, but directly into Ethan's mind, cold and devoid of emotion. Subject Ethan. The voice held the weight of mountains. Ethan stumbled back, his digitigrade legs nearly buckling as the entity's presence pressed against his mutations. His draconic eyes showed him nothing, no mana flows, no energy patterns. Just a void where the figure stood, absorbing all light and information. Your mutation rate exceeds parameters, the entity continued, its form shifting into a perfect tetrahedron before resolving back into silhouette. The synthesis master prototype was designed for item fusion, not biological integration. You have incorporated the mutation roulette into your core being. Ethan's biomechanical arm raised defensively, the living constrictor chains within it coiling ready. Who are you? I am the system's oversight function for anomalous developments. Your case has been elevated to catastrophic risk assessment. The entity floated closer, leaving no footprints in the dust. The temporary evolution stabilizer you created should not be possible with your current understanding. Yet you synthesized it by fusing your mutations with divine essence, a process that requires admin-level permissions. I didn't know. Ignorance is irrelevant. Your evolution follows no predictable path. Each level up introduces mutations that should be incompatible, yet you survive. You synthesize items that rewrite local reality. And now. The entity's form gestured toward the Dawnforge anvil. You fuse concepts with objects. This is beyond your designated function. Ethan's mind raced, the alien instincts now silent in the face of this greater presence. What function? What am I supposed to be? The entity's form stabilized into a perfect sphere of blue light. The Synthesis Master was a prototype for accelerating planetary evolution. In controlled conditions, it would have allowed a species to adapt rapidly to new environments. But the system's descent was unplanned. An emergency measure when higher-dimensional threats breached containment. So I'm an accident, Ethan said, his scaled skin prickling. You are an uncontrolled variable. The mutation roulette was meant to test biological limits, not become integrated with the synthesis function. Your body is rewriting itself using principles it should not comprehend. Your mind now hosts non-human cognitive patterns. The entity floated closer until it hovered just before Ethan's face. Its light cast strange shadows across the ruined cathedral. There are two paths forward, Subject Ethan. You may be the solution, a being who can synthesize new forms of life to repair this broken world. Or you may be a catastrophe, a mutation that spreads uncontrollably, consuming all in its hunger to become more. The air grew colder. Ethan's breath fogged thicker. The assessment period begins now, the entity said, its voice dropping to a whisper that vibrated in Ethan's bones. You will be observed. Your choice is measured. Your mutations catalogued. And if you trend toward catastrophe, the entity's form dissolved into thousands of shimmering particles. You will be terminated. The particles vanished, leaving Ethan alone with the Dawnforge anvil and the whispering instincts in his mind. Outside the ruined cathedral, the sun continued to rise, unaware that something had just been judged in its light. The holographic entity shimmered like fractured starlight in the cathedral's ruined nave, its form neither solid nor ephemeral but something that hurt the eyes to perceive directly. Ethan's draconic eyes adjusted instinctively, parsing the entity's energy signature into streams of data that flowed like liquid code. The scaled skin along his arms prickled, and the crystalline feathers along his spine hummed with resonant frequencies that matched the entity's oscillations. Prototype designation, Synthesis Master, the entity spoke, its voice a chorus of overlapping tones that echoed from the stone walls. Purpose, planetary evolution acceleration through controlled mutation and fusion protocols. You were meant to test boundaries of biological and metaphysical synthesis. Ethan's biomechanical tentacle arm twitched, its segmented plates clicking as it coiled defensively around his torso. The alien instincts that had taken root in his mind since the temporary evolution stabilizer whispered warnings, this entity represented both opportunity and termination. He could feel the digitigrade legs beneath him ready to spring, the claws at their tips scraping against broken marble. The mutation roulette was never intended for integration with the primary synthesis function, the entity continued, floating closer. Its form resolved into something vaguely humanoid, though composed entirely of shifting geometric patterns. It was a stress test module designed to evaluate adaptability under extreme physiological transformation. Your fusion of the two systems has created irregularities. Irregularities? Ethan's voice came out rougher than he intended, the draconic resonance in his throat adding harmonics that made the word vibrate in the air. You mean these? He gestured with his normal hand toward the crystalline feathers that now covered half his back, their surfaces catching the faint light filtering through the cathedral's shattered stained glass. Those are manifestations, the entity corrected. The true irregularity is your escalating energy signature. Higher dimensional watchers have taken notice. Your synthesis events create ripples in reality's fabric that propagate beyond this planetary sphere. Ethan's mind raced. The Dawnforge anvil he'd created still glowed softly nearby, its mythic-grade energy pulsing in time with his heartbeat. He could feel the living constrictor chains in his inventory, the legendary item he'd synthesized from his own mutation and an enemy's skill, waiting to be summoned. Every fusion, every level up, every mutation, they were all connected. What do these watchers want? He asked, his draconic eyes narrowing as they tracked the entity's energy flows. He could see tendrils of data extending upward from the entity, connecting to something vast and incomprehensible far above. Observation. Assessment. Intervention if necessary. The entity's form flickered. You represent a potential solution to this world's collapse, or its final catastrophe. Your ability to synthesize anything could repair broken systems, restore ecological balance, even reverse monster corruption. Or it could unravel reality itself if your mutations continue escalating without control. Ethan felt a cold dread settle in his stomach, warring with the alien instincts that urged him to fuse, to create, to evolve. The scaled skin along his arms tightened. He remembered the camp medic's whispered concerns, Marcus's wary praise, Kale's distant observations. They had all seen pieces of what he was becoming, but none understood the whole. Show me, Ethan demanded, stepping forward. The crystalline feathers along his spine flared, casting prismatic patterns across the rubble. If I'm supposed to be some kind of solution, show me what that looks like. Show me the endpoint. The entity remained silent for 3 heartbeats. Ethan counted them, each pulse sending vibrations through his mutated circulatory system that he could feel in his biomechanical arm. Accessing that data requires synthesis beyond your current parameters, the entity finally said. You would need to fuse conceptual understanding with raw system data, a metasynthesis that risks permanent cognitive alteration. Ethan's mind flashed back to the alien whispers that had come with the temporary evolution stabilizer. Fusion of living things. Biological rewriting. Concepts made manifest. He looked at the Dawnforge anvil, then at his own mutated hands, one flesh, one segmented metal and organic tissue. I've been altering myself since the first level up, he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his tentacle arm. Show me. The entity extended a limb of pure light. The cost will be significant. 60 mana points minimum, plus a temporal sacrifice. 30 days of your lifespan, irrevocably burned. Ethan didn't hesitate. He reached out with both hands, flesh and biomechanical, and grasped the entity's light limb. His draconic eyes flared with mana perception, drinking in the data streams that flowed through the connection. He focused on everything he'd learned since awakening the synthesis master cheat, the feel of items fusing, the shock of mutations, the terror and exhilaration of becoming something other. This was the ultimate synthesis. Not item with item or skill with mutation, but understanding with raw information. Concept with data. Begin, he whispered. Mana surged from his core, 55 MP from his reserves, then 5 more pulled from his very life force. The crystalline feathers along his spine shattered into dust that swirled around him in a glittering vortex. His draconic eyes wept streams of liquid light. The scaled skin peeled away in places, revealing pulsating energy beneath. And then came the lifespan burn. Ethan felt it like a cold hand reaching into his chest and pulling out something essential. 30 days of future existence, gone in an instant. He aged before his own eyes, wrinkles appearing at the corners of his non-draconic eye, silver threading through his hair, then reversing as the synthesis completed its work. Between his hands and the entity's limb, reality tore. Not a physical tear, but a conceptual one. A gap through which Ethan saw not with eyes but with his entire being. Patterns unfolded, evolutionary trees branching in impossible directions, biological forms merging with technological ones, living dungeons that grew like coral reefs across ruined cities. And at the center of it all, a being of pure synthesis. It was him, but not him. A form composed of every mutation he'd ever had and countless more he hadn't, draconic wings of crystalline feathers, multiple biomechanical limbs that terminated in both tools and weapons, eyes that saw across dimensional layers, a circulatory system that pumped not blood but raw creative potential. This being didn't just synthesize items, it synthesized ecosystems, weather patterns, even fragments of time and memory. It was a dungeon made flesh. Or flesh made dungeon. The distinction blurred. The vision showed this being standing at the center of a restored Earth, monsters transformed into symbiotic creatures, ruined cities rebuilt with living architecture that grew and adapted, humans with controlled mutations that enhanced without consuming. But it also showed another possibility, the same being unraveling reality into chaotic soup, everything fused into everything else until distinction ceased to exist. 2 endpoints. Solution or catastrophe. The synthesis completed. The entity's light limb withdrew, and Ethan stumbled back, collapsing against the Dawnforge anvil. In his hands, both hands now, the biomechanical one retracting its segments, he held a scroll that glowed with internal light. Not paper, but solidified possibility. Evolution blueprint, godly. The entity watched him, its geometric pattern cycling through colors Ethan had no names for. You have seen, it stated. Now you understand the assessment parameters. Your actions from this moment forward will determine which endpoint manifests. Ethan unrolled the blueprint. The images weren't static, they shifted as he watched, showing different evolutionary paths branching from his current form. Some led to stability, others to madness. All required further synthesis, further mutation, further cost. He was about to speak when the world trembled. Not an earthquake, but a convergence. A pulling. From outside the cathedral ruins came the sounds of monsters, not the scattered growls of random encounters, but the coordinated movements of a gathering swarm. Howls, screeches, the skittering of chitinous legs, the flap of leathery wings. Hundreds. Thousands. Ethan's draconic eyes flared wide. Through the cathedral's broken walls, he saw them coming, creatures of every type and classification, moving with singular purpose. They weren't attacking each other. They weren't hunting random prey. They were all moving toward one location. This location. His location. The evolution blueprint in his hands pulsed with energy that seemed to call to them, a beacon shining in a frequency only monsters could perceive. His escalating mutations, the godly grade synthesis he'd just performed, the temporal sacrifice, it had all created a signal too bright to ignore. The Watchers are not the only ones observing, the entity said, its form beginning to dissipate. Your energy signature now registers as both threat and opportunity to the planet's corrupted lifeforms. They will come. They will test what you have become. The first monsters reached the cathedral's perimeter, a pack of shadowstalkers with too many legs and jaws that unhinged like snakes. Behind them came flare bats with sonic screech abilities, then a lumbering stone behemoth that made the ground shake with each step. Ethan looked from the approaching horde to the evolution blueprint in his hands, then to his own mutated body. The alien instincts in his mind weren't whispering now, they were screaming. Fuse. Evolve. Survive. Or be consumed by the very apocalypse he was meant to solve. The cathedral ruins trembled as Ethan clutched the evolution blueprint, godly, its ethereal light casting shifting patterns across the broken stone. Outside, the air thickened with the scent of ozone and decay. Through the gaping holes in the vaulted ceiling, he could see the horizon darkening, not with storm clouds, but with the chitinous carapaces and leathery wings of thousands of converging monsters. His draconic eyes, pupils slit like a reptile's, perceived the mana flows swirling toward his location in a vortex of crimson and violet energy. Every mutation in his body responded, crystalline feathers along his spine vibrating with defensive resonance, the biomechanical tentacle arm twitching with predatory anticipation, scaled skin tightening over digitigrade legs ready to spring. A notification flashed in his vision, burning with system urgency. Global alert, world-ending boss detected. Designation, the Devourer of Realms. Threat level, cataclysmic. Objective, consume anomalous energy signature, Ethan, synthesis master. ETA, 47 minutes. Ethan's breath hitched. The blueprint in his hands showed two branching paths, one where his synthesis stabilized into a force that could reshape reality, another where he unraveled into chaos that consumed everything. The alien instincts whispered louder now, not just urges but coherent thoughts, *, fuse. Integrate. Become the anchor or become the storm, *. He stumbled toward the Dawnforge anvil, mythic, its surface glowing with captured sunlight. The anvil hummed with potential, repelling the corrupt mana seeping from the approaching horde. But it wasn't enough. The monsters outside weren't just mindless beasts, he could see through his draconic eyes how their movements coordinated, how smaller creatures cleared paths for larger ones. They were being herded. Directed. And then he saw the human signatures. Through the cathedral's shattered stained glass, Ethan spotted figures moving through the ruins of the city beyond. Not survivors scavenging, these moved with military precision. His enhanced vision zoomed in, revealing armor emblazoned with the insignia of the rival guild. But there were others too. Different colors, different symbols. The survivor camp's markings. Even factions he'd never encountered before. All converging. All armed. A voice crackled through a discarded radio nearby, scavenged from the ruins, confirmed location. The mutant's energy signature is off the charts. Guild Alliance has agreed, neutralize the threat before the boss arrives. We can't risk him falling into that thing's jaws and giving it his power. Another voice, colder, the system entity's assessment is clear. He's an uncontrolled variable. We eliminate him, we might still salvage this world. Ethan's scaled hands clenched. They weren't here to help. They'd formed an alliance, humans who should have been fighting monsters were instead united against him. Because he was changing. Because his body was becoming something they couldn't understand. The crystalline feathers along his spine flared as a wave of despair threatened to overwhelm him. He'd helped them. Synthesized gear. Healed wounds. Created the sunburst of rejuvenating flame that had saved Lena and others. And now they saw him as just another monster to put down. The alien instincts surged, offering a different perspective, * they fear what they cannot control. Become what they fear. Become what even the Devourer fears, *. Ethan looked at his mutations, each a piece of chaotic power. The draconic eyes that saw mana flows. The crystalline feathers that deflected spells. The biomechanical tentacle arm with its crushing strength. The digitigrade legs for explosive movement. The scaled skin for protection. All unstable. All fighting for dominance in his flesh. Then he looked at the Dawnforge anvil. A tool of creation. Of synthesis. Fuse them, the instincts whispered. Asterisk, not just items. Not just skills. Fuse yourself with the tool. Become the synthesis, asterisk. Ethan's mind raced through possibilities. The evolution blueprint showed him pathways. If he could integrate his mutations into a controlled form, he might achieve temporary stability. Enough to face what was coming. Enough to survive. He placed his hands on the anvil. The sunlight within it responded to his touch, flowing up his arms. His MP gauge showed 285 remaining, enough for what he planned, but it would cost him. System, he whispered, though he knew no response would come. The entity had made its position clear, he was under assessment. This was his test. Ethan focused his will. He didn't just visualize combining items this time. He visualized his own body, the mutations as components, each with their own properties. The anvil as a framework. The synthesis not as creation of something external, but as integration of self with artifact. Synthesis initiated. Components asterisk. Draconic eyes of mana perception, unique. Crystalline feather deflection matrix, unique. Biomechanical tentacle arm assembly, unique. Digitigrade leg enhancement system, unique. Scaled skin integration, unique. Dawnforge anvil, mythic. MP cost, 70. Additional cost, permanent integration of biological and artifact systems. Risk, complete system failure if synthesis unstable. Ethan didn't hesitate. He poured his MP into the synthesis, feeling the energy drain from him like blood from a wound. The anvil glowed blindingly bright, the sunlight within it becoming liquid gold that flowed over his body. Pain erupted, not the tearing agony of mutation, but the precise, surgical sensation of integration. His draconic eyes didn't change, but he felt them connecting to something new. The crystalline feathers detached from his spine, floating in the air before rearranging themselves into interlocking plates. The biomechanical tentacle arm retracted, its components disassembling and reforming. His legs straightened then reforged. His scaled skin shimmered as golden light infused it. The anvil itself dissolved into the synthesis, its essence becoming the binding force that wove everything together. When the light faded, Ethan stood transformed. Covering his body was armor that looked less like something worn and more like something grown, a seamless exoskeleton of interlocking crystalline plates that shimmered with captured sunlight. Where his draconic eyes had been, the helmet's visor now glowed with the same slit-pupiled perception, giving him 360-degree mana vision. His arms ended not in hands but in articulated manipulators that could shift between delicate precision and crushing strength, the biomechanical tentacles' capabilities integrated throughout. His legs were reinforced digitigrade structures, the scaled skin now part of the armor's inner layer. And he could feel it all, every piece, every system. Not as separate mutations fighting for control, but as integrated components of a single entity. Synthesis complete. Body artifact symbiosis armor, godly, created. Properties asterisk. Integrates all current mutations into controlled exoskeleton. Provides admin-level resistance to external mana disruption. Enhances synthesis potency by 300%. Temporary stability, 24 hours before integration stress requires recalibration. MP regeneration increased by 150%. Warning, permanent biological artifact fusion. Cannot be removed without catastrophic system failure, asterisk asterisk. Ethan flexed his new hands, watching as the crystalline plates shifted smoothly. For the first time since his first mutation, his body felt like his own. The alien instincts were still there, but they were channeled. Focused through the armor's systems. He took a step, and the ground didn't crack, his movements were controlled, powerful but precise. The armor weighed nothing, feeling like a second skin that enhanced rather than restricted. Outside, the sounds of battle erupted. Human factions had encountered the monster vanguard. Gunfire mixed with spells and roars. Ethan moved to the cathedral's entrance, his new visor analyzing the battlefield. The rival guild forces had taken defensive positions, their energy barriers flickering under monster assaults. Survivor camp fighters, he recognized Marcus's hunting rifle flash, fought beside them, an uneasy alliance against a common threat. But their attention kept shifting toward the cathedral. Toward him. And beyond them, the main horde approached. Thousands strong. And at their center, something massive moved through the ruined city, toppling buildings with its passage. The Devourer of Realms. Ethan could feel its approach in the vibration through his armor's sensors. A pressure building in the air. The mana flows twisting toward it in a spiral of consumption. He stepped out of the cathedral ruins. Every eye turned toward him. Human and monster alike. The crystalline armor caught the fading sunlight, refracting it into rainbows across the battlefield. His form was neither fully human nor fully monster, something in between. Something new. Ethan. Marcus's voice carried across the distance, amplified by some skill. Stand down. We can still. A monster, a six-legged horror with too many mouths, lunged at the survivor camp leader. Ethan didn't think. He moved. His digitigrade legs propelled him forward in a blur of motion. Before the monster could reach Marcus, Ethan intercepted it. His armored manipulators shifted, forming blades of crystallized sunlight. One smooth motion severed the creature's head. He landed between the human forces and the monster vanguard, his armor's mana disruption field causing smaller creatures to recoil. I'm not your enemy, Ethan said, his voice modulated by the helmet into something that echoed with power. But that thing coming? It is everyone's enemy. He gestured toward the approaching shadow that now darkened the sky, a silhouette so vast it blotted out the sun. The Devourer of Realms had arrived. Its form defied comprehension, a shifting mass of darkness and teeth, with limbs that seemed to phase in and out of reality. Where it passed, the very air screamed as reality unraveled. Its eyes, countless and burning with void fire, fixed on Ethan. On the armor. On the synthesis. The human factions hesitated. The rival guild commander barked orders to hold fire. Marcus lowered his rifle slightly, his expression unreadable across the distance. Ethan faced the Devourer alone, his new armor humming with integrated power. The body artifact symbiosis held, for now. The mutations were controlled. The synthesis was stable. But as the world-ending boss's shadow fell over him, darkening the sky completely, Ethan knew this was just the beginning. The armor gave him 24 hours of stability. After that, he'd either have synthesized a solution, or become part of the Devourer's feast. The Devourer of Realms descended upon the cathedral ruins like a falling star made of teeth and shadow. Its form was a shifting mass of obsidian scales and void tendrils, each movement tearing at the fabric of reality around it. Below, the combined human forces, the rival guild in tactical armor and the survivor camp in scavenged gear, opened fire, their bullets and spells creating a chaotic crossfire that Ethan stood at the center of. Ethan's body artifact symbiosis armor hummed with contained power, the exoskeleton of crystalline plates and biomechanical joints glowing with internal mana. His draconic eyes, now integrated into the helmet's visor, tracked everything at once, the Devourer's descent vector, the positions of 37 human combatants, the weak points in the crumbling cathedral walls. The armor's temporary stability was a fragile shield against the alien instinct still whispering in his mind, urges to fuse, to consume, to become more. Focus on the mutant, shouted a rival guild commander from behind a barricade of overturned vehicles. The monster will finish him if we don't. Ethan didn't wait for their coordination. His crystalline feathers detached from the armor's backplate with a sound like shattering glass, becoming a storm of razor-sharp projectiles. They sliced through the air, deflecting incoming spells from the humans while embedding themselves in the lesser monsters that swarmed at the Devourer's heels. Each feather pulsed with mana disruption energy, causing spellcasters to stagger as their incantations fizzled. His biomechanical tentacle arm, now a seamless extension of the armor, uncoiled with hydraulic precision. It slammed into the ground, fracturing the earth and creating a trench that swallowed 3 advancing guild soldiers. The arm then retracted, its grasping claws snatching a phasing arrow from his inventory. Ethan didn't need to knock it, the armor synthesized the arrow's properties directly into the tentacle's tip, which fired a beam of phased energy that passed through cover to strike a guild sniper positioned on a distant rooftop. The Devourer landed with earth-shattering force, its 6 void-black eyes fixing on Ethan. A roar emanated from it, not sound, but a wave of spatial distortion that liquefied stone and flesh alike. Ethan's draconic eyes flared, firing twin mana beams that met the distortion in midair. The collision created a screaming vortex of energy that tore apart the cathedral's remaining spires. He's holding it back, someone from the survivor camp yelled. Ethan recognized Marcus's voice, though he couldn't see the camp leader through the chaos. But holding back wasn't enough. Ethan's health bar, visible in his peripheral vision through the system interface, was already at 65%. The symbiosis armor stabilized his mutations, but every use of their integrated powers drained him. The Devourer, meanwhile, seemed inexhaustible. It absorbed the energy of destroyed monsters and human casualties, growing larger with each passing second. Ethan activated his blink step technique, appearing directly beneath the Devourer's bulk. His scaled skin, now part of the armor's underlayer, hardened against the corrosive aura the boss emitted. He drove his glass-tipped spear upward, the weapon enhanced by the Dawnforge Anvil's synthesis boost. The spear pierced a scale, but the Devourer barely flinched, its health bar dropped by only 2%. A tentacle of pure shadow whipped around, crushing Ethan against a pillar. The armor held, but cracks spiderwebbed across the crystalline plates. Warning messages flashed: symbiosis stability, 18 hours remaining. He had to end this. Not just survive, but transcend. The evolution blueprint unfolded in his mind's eye, showing the two paths: dungeon being of restoration, or chaos of unraveling. Both required synthesis at a scale he'd never attempted. His essence, his very concept of self, would be the catalyst. Ethan disengaged, blinking to the cathedral's central altar where the Dawnforge Anvil still pulsed with mythic energy. The human forces, seeing his retreat, redoubled their assault. Guild mages channeled firestorms, while camp fighters provided covering fire. The Devourer advanced, its maw opening to reveal a singularity of devouring energy. Now, Ethan whispered to himself, the word lost in the din. He reached into his inventory, pulling forth every synthesized item he possessed: the mana-infused healing salve, the sunburst of rejuvenating flame, the mana disruption field generator, the living constrictor chains, the evolution blueprint itself. They floated around him in a halo of legendary and godly light. Then, he turned his draconic eyes toward the Devourer's core, a pulsing orb of mythic energy visible only through his mana sight. This would cost everything. Ethan extended both hands, the biomechanical tentacle arm mirroring the gesture. He channeled 100 MP, his entire mana pool, into a synthesis command so vast it made the system interface glitch with static. At the same time, he sacrificed health, watching his bar plummet from 65% to 5% in a single, agonizing moment. Apotheosis synthesis, he declared, the words not spoken but felt in the bones of the world. His essence, the accumulated experiences of surviving the apocalypse, the alien instincts of his mutations, the desperate hope to control his own transformation, flowed outward. It merged with the Devourer's mythic core, which resisted with the fury of a world-ending entity. The synthesis wasn't gentle, it was a violent marriage of opposites, a fusion that tore at the laws of physics. The halo of items dissolved into streams of light, weaving into the merging energies. The sunburst of rejuvenating flame became a corona of healing fire that seared and mended simultaneously. The living constrictor chains wrapped around the Devourer, not to bind but to integrate. The evolution blueprint unfolded into reality, its pathways glowing like celestial maps. Reality warped. The cathedral ruins dissolved into a kaleidoscope of impossible geometries. The human forces froze mid-action, their expressions captured in moments of terror or awe. The Devourer's form unraveled, its mythic core flowing into the synthesis like ink in water. Ethan felt his own body disassembling, the draconic eyes, the crystalline feathers, the tentacle arm, the scaled skin, the digitigrade legs, all dissolving into pure potential. His consciousness expanded, touching the edges of the system itself. He sensed the oversight entity watching, its assessment parameters overloading with data. He felt the higher dimensional watchers leaning closer, their attention like gravitational tides. Then, convergence. The warped reality collapsed inward, forming a nexus of glowing energy at the cathedral's epicenter. Within it, Ethan's form reconstituted, not as human, not as monster, but as something entirely new. A humanoid figure of shimmering light, his features indistinct but radiating controlled power. His mutations were gone, replaced by a seamless integration of synthesis and self. The armor had vanished, absorbed into his being. He floated above the ground, the last echoes of the apotheosis synthesis fading. The Devourer was no more, its energy now part of him. The human forces stared, their weapons lowering. The lesser monsters, bereft of their leader, scattered into the ruins. Ethan looked at his hands, they glowed with internal luminescence, each movement leaving trails of light in the air. He felt stable. Complete. For the first time since his first mutation, the chaotic urges were silent, replaced by a profound understanding of synthesis as a fundamental force. But as the glow around him intensified, reality began to warp again, not from destruction, but from creation. The ground beneath him bloomed with crystalline flowers that emitted soft mana light. The air hummed with harmonic frequencies. The system interface flickered, then displayed a new, unprecedented notification. Apotheosis synthesis complete. Evolution pathway, dungeon being of restoration activated. Reality reintegration in progress. Ethan realized the transformation wasn't over. It was just beginning. And as the light from his form spread outward, touching the broken world, he understood that he was no longer just Ethan, he was becoming the synthesis itself. The world held its breath in the silence after the Devourer's dissolution. Ethan stood at the center of the cathedral ruins, but he was no longer the man who had entered them. His transformation had completed, reality knitting itself back together around him like threads of light weaving a new tapestry. He examined his hands, still human in shape, but composed of something beyond flesh. His skin shimmered with the iridescent quality of his former crystalline feathers, patterns of light moving beneath the surface like liquid mana. Where his draconic eyes had once been, his vision now encompassed multiple spectrums simultaneously. He saw the heat signatures of the surviving humans huddled behind barricades, the lingering energy trails of the vanished monsters, and the intricate web of Earth's fractured ley lines glowing like cracked glass across the planetary surface. His biomechanical tentacle arm had integrated into his form, giving him an intuitive understanding of spatial manipulation. He could feel the distance between atoms. The body artifact symbiosis armor had dissolved into his being, its godly properties now intrinsic to his existence. He wore simple clothing that seemed to shift between materials, one moment leather, the next silk, then something that resembled living crystal, all synthesized from ambient energy. His digitigrade legs provided perfect balance, while his scaled skin had transformed into adaptive armor that could harden or soften at will. Most importantly, the chaotic mutations had stabilized. The dungeon being of restoration, evolution pathway had integrated every aspect of his being into a harmonious whole. He was synthesis made manifest. Around him, the battlefield lay transformed. The Devourer's remains weren't physical matter but concentrated mythic essence, swirling vortices of purple and gold energy that pulsed with the power to consume realities. The human factions watched from a distance, weapons lowered but not sheathed. Marcus stood at the front of the survivor camp survivors, his hunting rifle hanging slack in his hands, face pale with awe. Kale of the rival guild had emerged from hiding, recording device forgotten as he stared at the being Ethan had become. Ethan took a step forward. The ground didn't just yield beneath his foot, it responded. Grass sprouted where he stepped, not the sickly vegetation of the post-system world but vibrant green blades that hummed with life energy. He realized he wasn't just walking on Earth, he was interacting with its fundamental systems. His draconic vision turned down a perspective showed him the damage in horrifying detail. The system's descent had shattered planetary ley lines, the natural energy channels that maintained ecological balance. These fractures allowed monster spawns, created unstable dungeons, and prevented proper healing of the biosphere. The Devourer's attack had worsened these cracks, threatening to unravel reality itself in this region. Ethan raised a hand toward the Devourer's essence. The mythic energy swirled toward him, not with violence but with natural attraction, like iron to a magnet. He didn't need to expend MP, his very existence was synthesis now. The energy merged with his being, and he understood its properties completely, reality-devouring capabilities, spatial manipulation, dimensional anchoring. He then looked downward, through layers of earth and stone, to where the ley lines glowed with painful brightness at their fracture points. These weren't items he could hold, but concepts, the planet's circulatory system. Previously, synthesizing concepts had required tremendous cost. Now, it felt as natural as breathing. Ethan extended both hands, one toward the Devourer's essence, the other toward the deepest ley line fracture. He didn't speak incantations or activate skills, he simply willed the synthesis to occur. The effect was instantaneous and planetary. Golden light erupted from Ethan, not in an explosion but in an expanding sphere of harmonious energy that moved at the speed of thought. Where it passed, the air purified itself, toxins from monster remains and ancient pollution synthesized into harmless compounds. The ground healed, cracks sealing as if time reversed. Wounded humans, both survivor camp members and rival guild forces, found their injuries knitting together without scars. But the true transformation happened beneath the surface. The Devourer's mythic essence fused with Earth's ley line network. Instead of destroying, the reality-devouring properties were inverted through synthesis, they consumed the instability, the fractures, the chaotic energy leaks. The spatial manipulation capabilities anchored the lines in stable configurations. The dimensional properties created bridges between severed segments. A notification appeared in Ethan's vision, not from the system but generated by his own evolved consciousness. Global Synthesis Network, Transcendent, created. Effect, planetary ley lines restored and enhanced with synthesis properties. Controlled evolution now possible for worthy humans. Monster spawn rates reduced by 90%. Environmental degradation reversing. Synthesis energy available worldwide at minimal cost to users, ***. Ethan felt the network activate. It was like becoming aware of a new limb that spanned the globe. He could sense every surviving human settlement, every dungeon, every monster nest. The network wasn't under his direct control, it was a system he had created, operating on principles of balance and growth. Marcus stepped forward, his rifle now slung over his shoulder. "Ethan?" he asked, voice trembling. "I'm still here," Ethan said, and his voice carried the weight of mountains and the gentleness of spring rain. "The mutations, they're part of me now. Stable. Controlled." Lena emerged from the survivor camp group, her wounds from earlier battles completely healed. She approached cautiously. "You healed everyone. The ground, it's alive again." Before Ethan could respond, Kale stepped forward, dropping to one knee. "My guild sought to capture you. We feared what you were becoming." He looked up, and for the first time, his expression held genuine respect rather than clinical observation. "We were wrong. You didn't become a monster. You became what the world needed," Ethan finished softly. He looked at the assembled humans, former enemies now united in survival. The Global Synthesis Network will allow controlled evolution. No more random mutations. Those who prove worthy, who protect others, who create rather than destroy, can gain abilities through synthesis. Safely. Gradually. He gestured, and a simple workshop appeared beside him, an anvil, tools, materials, all synthesized from ambient energy. "I'll teach the principles. How to fuse items properly. How to avoid the costs I paid." As he spoke, he realized the full implications of his transformation. He wasn't human anymore, not entirely. But he wasn't a dungeon being in the monstrous sense either. He was a nexus, a living embodiment of synthesis who could interface with reality itself. His synthesis master ability had evolved beyond a cheat, it was now the foundation of a new world order. The sky, which had been perpetually gray since the system's descent, began to clear. Patches of blue appeared. Sunlight, real, warm sunlight, touched the cathedral ruins for the first time in months. Then the air before Ethan shimmered. The system entity manifested, but not as the distant, incomprehensible presence from before. It took a form humans could comprehend, a figure of shifting light, genderless and ageless, wearing robes that seemed woven from data streams. It regarded Ethan with what might have been approval. Then it knelt. The gesture sent shockwaves through the survivors. This entity that had imposed the system, that had turned their world into a game-like hellscape, was kneeling to the man they'd known as Ethan. "You have passed the test," the entity said, its voice resonating in every mind present. "The era of chaos ends. What will you build now?" Ethan looked at the clearing sky, the healing land, the humans watching him with hope instead of fear. He felt the global synthesis network humming beneath his feet, connecting all life on Earth in a web of potential. He smiled, and in that expression was the wisdom of his mutations, the creativity of his synthesis, and the humanity he'd never lost. "Something better," he said. And the world began anew. The air smelled different now. Not of ash and blood, but of ozone and possibility. Ethan stood at the heart of what had once been a ruined city block, now transformed into a sanctuary of shimmering geometries. The ground beneath his feet pulsed with gentle energy, the global synthesis network breathing life back into the world. His form was humanoid, but only in the most generous sense. Light flowed through crystalline structures that traced his outline, a harmonious integration of all he had been, draconic eyes now gentle orbs of guidance, crystalline feathers arranged in patterns that hummed with protective resonance, biomechanical elements woven seamlessly into a form that was both alien and profoundly familiar. He was the dungeon being of restoration, and the world knew it. Survivors gathered at the edges of the sanctuary, their expressions a mix of awe and trepidation. Ethan recognized faces from both camps, Marcus with his hunting rifle now slung over his shoulder, Lena standing strong with no trace of her former wounds, even Kale from the rival guild, his scout's keen eyes now filled with curiosity rather than suspicion. They were the first students of this new era. Ethan raised a hand, and the air shimmered. From nothing, he synthesized a simple wooden staff and a chunk of iron ore. No MP cost registered in his awareness, his power flowed from the network itself, from the very fabric of reality he had rewoven. Watch closely, he said, his voice carrying without effort across the clearing. The principle is balance. Not domination. He brought the two items together. Where once synthesis had been a violent, explosive process, now it was a gentle merging. The wood and iron flowed into one another, becoming a living metal sapling that sprouted from his palm, leaves of polished steel catching the sunlight. This is controlled evolution, Ethan explained as the sapling grew, branching into intricate patterns. The system gave us chaos. We choose harmony. Marcus stepped forward, his commanding presence tempered by newfound humility. You're teaching us to do what you can do. Within limits, Ethan said. The network regulates synthesis potency. No one will accidentally create world-ending artifacts. No one will suffer uncontrolled mutations. As he spoke, he felt the system entity's presence, not as a distant monitor, but as a companion consciousness. It manifested as a shimmer in the air beside him, taking no specific form, yet communicating through shared understanding. The entity's voice echoed in Ethan's mind, *, the prototype has succeeded beyond parameters. Chaos contained. Order from randomness. What is your next directive, *? Ethan looked at the survivors beginning to practice simple syntheses under the network's guidance. A woman fused a scrap of cloth with a healing herb, creating a bandage that glowed with gentle restorative energy. A man combined two stones, producing a lens that focused sunlight into warmth. Small miracles, each one. But Ethan felt the deeper truth. His own stability was perfect, yes, the dungeon being form integrated every mutation, every artifact, into harmonious unity. Yet harmony wasn't stagnation. The potential still hummed within him, a low-frequency vibration in his crystalline bones. He turned to the system entity. There's one more synthesis needed. The entity pulsed with curiosity. Query, materials. Concepts, Ethan said. My legacy. Your protocols. He extended both hands. From one palm flowed the essence of all he had learned, the terror of random mutations turned to understanding, the power of creation balanced with responsibility, the hard-won wisdom that true strength came from integration, not domination. It manifested as a tapestry of light, showing his journey from frightened survivor to this moment. From the other hand, he drew forth the system's update protocols, the very mechanisms that had once triggered level-ups and mutations randomly. Now purified through the network, they were patterns of potential, algorithms of growth. Minimal energy, Ethan whispered. Maximum permanence. He brought the concepts together. The synthesis didn't flash or roar. It settled. Like ink dispersing in water, the two essences merged and spread through reality itself. The air thickened with promise. Every survivor felt it, a new layer to existence, a fundamental agreement written into the world's laws. The eternal evolution accord, transcendent, took form not as an object, but as a truth. Ethan felt it settle into the network, into the system, into the very particles of Earth. Balance forever, he said aloud. Controlled growth. Protection against abuse. The right to evolve, but never at the cost of others. The system entity shimmered brightly, then dimmed to a steady glow. Directive achieved. Prototype becomes foundation. Monitoring shifts to stewardship, Days flowed into weeks. The sanctuary grew. Ethan taught, guided, and occasionally demonstrated more complex syntheses, always within the Accord's boundaries. He watched as survivors who had once cowered from monsters now cultivated gardens of synthesized plants that repelled creatures naturally. He saw children learning to fuse playthings into educational tools under safe supervision. Lena approached him one evening as the sanctuary's crystalline structures glowed with captured sunset. We're building something better, she said, echoing his words from the transformation. Just like you promised. Ethan nodded. His draconic eyes, now gentle and wise, surveyed the thriving community. This is only the beginning. The network will spread. Other sanctuaries will rise. The apocalypse becomes Renaissance. But even as he spoke, he felt it. Deep within his stable, godlike form, the hum of potential never faded. It wasn't a threat, not the terrifying roulette of before, but a readiness. His body, though perfectly integrated, remained what it had always been, an instrument of synthesis. The synthesis master, forever. He stood at the sanctuary's highest point that night, watching lights flicker to life below, not fearful campfires, but synthesized glow orbs that cast warm, safe illumination. People laughed. A group practiced combining musical instruments, creating harmonies that had never existed before. Then the tremor came. Faint. Almost imperceptible. A vibration in his crystalline core that resonated with something distant, not a threat, not a mutation trigger, but potential. A whisper from the Accord itself, suggesting that somewhere, somehow, a synthesis possibility existed that even the network hadn't catalogued. An evolution waiting to be chosen, not forced. Ethan smiled. His body hummed in response, not with chaos, but with readiness. Forever the synthesis master. Forever evolving, when the world needed it. Below, the new era thrived. Above, the stars seemed closer than they'd ever been.